Chapter 604. For some reason, Huaisher always had 100,000 complaints about that old bastard Russell. He really wanted to find an opportunity to stab him in the back a few times to avenge his persecution, but he couldn't beat him. Instead, he had to be ordered around by him every day, dedicating his youth to the ivory tower. 2 days ago, when he was filming the promotional video, he was dragged over to be a tool for a long time, and he didn't get a single cent. It was as if the part's copyright was nothing. It was simply lawless. If it weren't for the fact that Kitten wouldn't pick up his call, Huaisher would have directly called the legal department to come and ask for money. Tai E Courtyard occupied a large area, but there weren't many buildings on the surface. Most of them were underground, in a strange atmosphere left behind by countless alchemy experiments. There were only a few lonely small buildings. There wasn't even a blade of grass growing around them, and from time to time, black smoke would come out of the cracks in the ground. It was impossible to imagine what this group of people was doing here. Before they reached the door, a person with a cane came up to greet them warmly. The white-haired old man looked a little stooped, wearing a loose Ingzhou uniform, and had been waiting for a long time. "Sorry to keep you waiting, Mr. Ping." Huaisher hurriedly apologized. "I'm sorry. We should have come earlier." "It's nothing. It's just that this old man couldn't wait any longer. Thank you for allowing me to watch." The old man grinned, his wrinkled face smiling like an old chrysanthemum. "I've already heard about the craftsman's skills from Mr. Simon. I'm really curious, really curious." As he spoke, he began to laugh strangely, sending chills down their spines. Come, Mr. Huaisher, your laboratory and secret instruments are all ready." The old man walked in front with his walking stick. He led them through a series of twists and turns in the building, walking deeper and deeper into the darkness. There was definitely something wrong with this building. Behind Huaisher, Lin Shurjio's face was pale. The space and direction inside were completely illogical, and there were also problems with the structure and layout, making people unable to figure out their own position and direction. It was unbelievably large. More importantly, the dense negative origin substances and the aura of disaster inside. It was like walking into some kind of hell. There was a chill that made people shiver uncontrollably. The little hut in the forest saw its shadow leave its body and wriggle on the wall. When it sensed his gaze, its head twisted into an unbelievable angle. She turned back and smiled at him. His expression twitched as he hurriedly followed behind Huaisher, not leaving her by a single step. He was just short of pretending to be young and holding her hand. Huaisher heaved a long sigh of relief. He turned around and asked, "You turn on the air conditioner so early?" "Ah, yes, that's right." The manager of the workshop nodded in agreement and patted his back. I'm old and I'm afraid of the heat. I hope Mr. White doesn't mind." It's fine. I'm pretty cool too." Huaisher nodded in agreement and walked into the flashing elevator. Just as everyone went up, the lights above their heads suddenly dimmed and went out completely. In the brief darkness, Lin Shurjio felt something brush past his face. It was so cold and so soft. He froze on the spot. Then, she heard a hoarse cough. It was low and sharp, tearing through the darkness and bringing light back. "Sorry, the voice-controlled lights installed a few years ago are broken again." The old man squinted his eyes and waved his hand awkwardly. After pressing the elevator's meter twice, the elevator slowly closed and finally began to descend. Lin Shurjio subconsciously moved closer to Huaisher again, almost hugging his legs. On the inner wall of the elevator next to him, the mold-like stains and spots began to wriggle faintly and slowly spread, forming a rapidly protruding face. Then, a hand came over with a detergent and sprayed it twice. It disappeared. "Sorry, it seems that the cleaners didn't clean up today. It's rare to have visitors here, so everyone is a little casual. I didn't expect them to slack off to this extent. I'll take good care of it later. It's really outrageous." As he spoke, Pingdu stuffed the spray bottle filled with highly concentrated holy water back into his sleeve and grinned at the guests. "Everyone, please bear with us. After all, this is the only century-old building on campus. Kiki, it's been in disrepair for a long time, in disrepair, Lin Sergio wisely kept quiet. He was afraid that he would be eaten by this old ghost. Who knew what this old ghost was doing on a daily basis? He was surrounded by all kinds of curses and disasters. Even a single age spot on his face could poison an entire school to death. Moreover, in this damned place like the Ivory Tower, even if a school building was not renovated for 2 years, there would be 18 ghost stories. To be able to treat this building as a century-old building, it was probably a collection of ghost kings. As a normal person, he really couldn't compare to his teacher's level of thick nerves. Moreover, he was scared to death of ghosts. At this moment, he simply wanted to cry, but had no tears. If he had known earlier, he wouldn't have come. Fortunately, the laboratory was still clean and tidy, maintaining an absolutely stable environment required by the alchemy artifact. Even the depth of the interior could be adjusted. Using the latest technology, it can support up to level 17 artificial depth. There's no need to worry about the harsh environment required by some artifacts. Inside the huge laboratory, Ping Du raised his hand and caused the floor to slowly unfold, revealing the huge platform hidden below. After the preparation work was done, he stood to the side with a smile, as if he was invisible. He didn't rush Huaishur, but just stared with anticipation at the way he set up the artifact, clicking his tongue in wonder. The setting up of the artifact was quite complicated. After all, the skills of the forgers were different from alchemy. It was very troublesome to combine them together without any deviation. Huaishur took the blueprint that he got from the great grandmaster for free and operated step by step. There were even several mistakes in the process. If it wasn't for Ping Du's reminder, he wouldn't have noticed. In the middle, he also received an email from the old professor of the Russian Federation, Anton. The Ivory Tower's research on the mechanical crow. To simply refine the core idea, it was 4 words, can't help. This was really not within the scope of Anton's field of expertise, even if it was in the field of machinery and transmission. Professor Anton was even able to perfectly restore their structure without dismantling them, but it was useless. Just like a life form that evolved purely from machinery, all the operations in these crows' body were purely maintained by their own source substance and the miracle left behind by the forgers. It was very easy to strengthen them. A lot of external equipment could be stuffed in at any time, but the problem was that this didn't help them at all. It didn't make sense that by changing the graphics card and CPU, your XP system would become XP10. Although the forger's inheritance was the same as alchemy in terms of performance and effect, it was fundamentally 2 different ideas. No one knew what the consequences of random experimentation would be. Alchemists had a lot of bold ideas, but Huaishur didn't dare to try any of them. These were all his treasures. Occasionally, 2 or 3 of them would disappear because they couldn't be seen, and Huaishur's heart would ache to death. But despite his heartache, Huaishur still firmly prohibited the spread of the small books. Otherwise, what would happen if word got out? It would ruin his image. In short, according to the results of the Ivory Tower's research, the crows were healthy. They didn't suffer from heat stroke, nor did they break their legs or other accidents. The results of this upgrade were very good. With the help of the Sunmaker, they were uniformly given a perfect foundation template. It was like completing a profession change after leaving the novice village. They could freely change between source substance and mechanization. They obtained a high affinity for metal, which made it easier for Huaishur's confining hand to operate further. At the same time, they were also given a terrifying resistance to hell. They could move as usual even in an abnormal area 19 meters deep. Other than that, there was nothing else. This was just a foundation. Huaishur had to deal with the rest by himself. Therefore, after some research, the big bosses came to the conclusion that it wasn't difficult, but it wasn't easy either. Not difficult meant that it wasn't difficult at all for the big bosses. But for Huaishur, sorry, this operation is too smooth. I'm afraid you won't be able to learn it. Therefore, in the end, there were only 2 possible ways to implement it. One was to leave it to the heavens to see if the crows could rely on their own efforts to make Huaishur's destiny grow by repeating the Holy Scriptures every day, which in turn would help them improve. Perhaps they would even be able to give him a birthday celebration. The other was for Huaishur to work hard and research the techniques left behind by the Sunmaker to see if he could create a miracle. This could be considered a test left behind by the Sunmaker. The principle of 1 plus 1 is equal to 2 had already been taught to him. How to prove that 1 plus 1 is equal to 2 was up to him. He even considerately left behind some materials and tools for Huaishur. With a clang, the entire workshop was enveloped in a gloomy fog. The crows worked together to pull out the iron ingot that had been stuffed into the cage of dreams. For origin substance life forms like them, the despair contained within was too heavy. It took a few hundred crows a long time to pull it out. If they had been a few days later, this thing would have taken root inside. There was nothing they could do. If they hadn't done this, they wouldn't have been able to pass through the border customs. This thing looked like an iron ingot, but it was actually an amalgamation of negative origin substances. It was too pure and dense of despair. A curse born from despair and condensed from this curse was something that had undergone at least 3 transformations of origin substances. Once it was released, it was enough to cause an entire border to sink by a whole level. Even if it was an origin substance, it wasn't something that Huaishur's soul could absorb. It needed to be further refined. Huaishur was very excited to see what kind of weapon such a rich supply of negative origin substance and pure despair could create. When Huaishur raised his right hand, his steel-like limbs began to slowly unfurl. The furnace, slumbering within, began to light up. It was time to forge. Chapter 605. It would be a lie to say that he wasn't nervous about using the forger's technology for the first time. Fortunately, he had simulated it many times before and was confident in his confinement hand, so he didn't panic and wasn't afraid of losing control. After Huaishur returned to the present realm, the first thing he did was contact the Continuation Institute and upload all the technology left behind by the forgers. He didn't treat it as a great fortune or property, whether it was as a member of the Astronomical Society or as a member of the present realm. While enjoying so many conveniences, he still had to bear some obligations. The biggest reason for doing this was, of course, to entrust this technology that was too profound and obscure for Huaishur to someone trustworthy for identification. After all, it was a disaster technology that had once created the eternal frost furnace and the machine of immortality, so there might be a risk of solidification. Otherwise, if something went wrong, it wouldn't be a big deal if she died. Huaishur estimated that if the negative origin substances in her body were to erupt, it was very likely that even the ivory tower would be contaminated and innocent students would be implicated as well. Unexpected disasters had to be avoided as much as possible. Necessary caution was necessary. Although the same thing could be done by troubling Tangi or the Grandmaster, this job was really a big project. Who knew how long it would take just to verify all the possibilities of the forger furnace? It was too troublesome, so Huaishur didn't want to ask at all. In contrast, the Continuation Institute had so much manpower and material resources, and they didn't need money. Wasn't it easier than troubling their own people? According to the technology submitted by Huaishur, the Continuation Institute sent a commissioner to collect information, and the examination room also specially organized teams and groups. After a week of research, deduction, and observation, they finally gave Huaishur a guarantee. Don't worry, there won't be any problems. They even wrote a thick beginner's handbook for Huaishur, explaining all the key points that newbies should pay attention to and the phenomena that they should be vigilant of all the way from kindergarten to the end of compulsory education. In short, this thing was good stuff. You can keep it for yourself. You don't have to cooperate with us to submit it or restore it. If there was a problem, there was only one. It couldn't be replicated. All the forger's skills relied on the forger furnace as a foundation, just like all ascendants had to have a soul. But now, after searching the entire realm several times, there were only 2 forgers left. One was the Sunmaker, and the other was Huaishur. The Sunmaker's forger, which couldn't be caught, and Huaishur's forger furnace couldn't be dismantled. It was very difficult. Moreover, there was no need to replicate it. With the Survival Academy's technology, it was just a knockoff. Not to mention this thing, they could even create an eternal frost furnace. But what's the use? Purely in terms of cost-effectiveness and the difficulty of promotion of forger's ascendances, ascendant time teat, tees, alchemies, test, therefore. Apart from being an important technical record and a reference in some fields, there was no point in promoting or replicating it. The Stone Cauldron Society, on the other hand, was very interested. They bought 2 copies to study and finally got Huaishur to open one. All the precious materials needed for the forger furnace were bought with the Stone Cauldron Society's money. The rest went to a place where Huaishur could never find them again. He didn't expect that black-hearted woman to be so fast. Huaishur's heart ached when he thought about it. The priest is a foot high. The crow is 10 feet high. In short, just like that, Sui Xiong freeloaded a horse from the east, a saddle from the west, a horsetail from the south, and a whip from the north. Sui Xiong freeloaded a beginner's manual from the Continuation Institute, materials and forger furnace from the Stone Cauldron Society, and even designs from the Grandmaster. After all that, he finally got a set of things. He began the forger furnace. The furnace's flames ignited from the gap in his right arm. They spread and spread, followed by surging darkness that enveloped everything. For this kind of material formed from pure negative origin substances, the most suitable auxiliary tool was the miracle that had merged with Huaishur's soul, the bone burial sanctuary. He activated the furnace. The origin substance was poured in, and then the alchemy fire was ignited. And then the disintegration began. Huaishur's fingers contracted slightly, and he removed the shackles that the Sunmaker had sealed on it. In that instant, the violent despair began to collapse from its physical form. It cracked inch by inch and rapidly expanded, forming an explosive tide that swallowed everything. The seal wailed. Even the artificial depth couldn't make this enormous despair return to its original form. On the contrary, the pale flames from the kingdom of heaven increased the despair's ferocious might, causing the silent darkness to begin to boil. The moment the chain reaction was triggered, this uncontrollable power began to follow a set track like a roller coaster, wildly transforming towards the end. What Huaishur needed to do was guide this despair to complete the final qualitative change. It wouldn't destroy everything in front of him when it derailed. There's still one last step. At this moment, in the secret ritual, the burning flag in Huaishur's left hand appeared again and stabbed down. It completely swallowed all this despair into eternal darkness. The moment of rebirth had arrived. The cold light illuminated the color of steel. In the huge sealed underground facility, there were only layers of heavy defenses and various seals from the relics of the border, as well as the 24-hour surveillance and observation of the sublimators. Under the cover of countless arrays, there was only a huge crack in the center of the hall. It was a well, a giant deep well that was as large as a lake. Looking down from the observatory in the sky, one could see the unreasonable and terrifying size of the deep well, as well as everything sleeping in the well water. In the quiet well water, the outline and reflection of the incomplete city appeared. It was as if everything was submerged in the water, frozen in this sinking, and welcomed a peaceful sleep together with the terrifying things inside. Until the day of awakening arrived. The well water evaporated, and the sins and deaths of the past rose from the darkness, enveloping everything in destruction. The old campus. Russell sighed softly. No matter how many times I see it, I feel sad. The cradle that we were once proud of, the cornerstone laid by the idealists, has now fallen to such a state. After the fall of the kingdom of heaven, it's already not easy for the ivory tower, which is the foundation, to barely survive. Don't say anything about being greedy. Beside him, a slender and blurry silhouette appeared. Her voice was soft. You're not regretting anything. You just want to go back to the past. People are like this when they're old. Russell scratched his head. I miss everything when I was young. I miss myself back then. Don't you think so? What answered him was a meaningful look in her eyes. Don't ask questions about a lady's age. That's outrageous, Russell. Don't you think so? Ah, I'm just curious, just curious. Ignoring the terrifying experience of having just brushed shoulders with death, Russell laughed. Sorry, it's become a habit to take advantage of my seniority. I always forget about my partner. With your condition, you can at least live for another 300 years, Russell. For a stage 5, you're still in the prime of your life. But for ordinary people, it's already the age of retirement. Russell supported himself with his cane and couldn't help but sigh. Recently, I've been having a dream. In the dream, after getting rid of all the burdens, I ran on the beach with young girls, playing with each other with water guns. How happy it was. After waking up, once I think about it, I can't help but cry. I feel that my years have been wasted. Are you married? Russell didn't expect this question. After being stunned for a long time, he shook his head. No, I can't find a suitable one. Do you have an illegitimate child? I don't think so. Do you have someone you love? Maybe you used to have one. Russell thought for a while, took off his hat, and scratched his long white hair. He couldn't help but sigh, but they're all dead. Whether it's the one I love or the one who loves me, they've all become the past. Otherwise, they've sunk into hell. Then, the soft voice became sympathetic. That's why there's hatred, Russell, she said, towards the kingdom of heaven and towards yourself. Russell didn't say anything. What you love isn't youth. What you want isn't to run on the beach with girls without any worries. What you want isn't a successor to carry the burden for you. That pair of cold eyes scrutinized the man and told him the answer. You just want to take everything back. Russell looked back at the pair of eyes. After a long time, he laughed softly. He didn't say anything else. There was only the sound of the deep well under his feet gradually spreading. The well water was boiling, and something was rising quickly. Under the water, the silent city was shaking, and a roar burst out from the nightmare. Pairs of eyes opened and then slowly closed. In the end, a figure in a sorry state crawled out with difficulty. He pulled the life support chain that had long been broken and walked forward step by step. In his bosom, a copper bottle depicting the totems of various demon gods was vibrating violently. The thing sealed and it was struggling violently. Through the seal of the relic, the thing bound in it was violently struggling, trying to break through the shackles, but it was powerless. This was a cage that was carefully prepared for it. In the deep well, the boiling well water gradually calmed down, and everything returned to silence. It was only at that moment that everyone present finally heaved a sigh of relief. They rushed forward and began the emergency rescue. On the platform, Russell retracted his gaze. It's all thanks to the help you provided, madam. The old man looked at the phantom beside him. The supreme terminal has been recovered. With the axis of the former utopia, the final problem of the Sky Prison Fortress has finally been solved. It's just a map and a few keys. Don't mention it. The figure waved his hand indifferently and turned to leave. Russell was stunned. You're leaving just like that? What else? You can handle the rest yourself, right? The phantom turned around and said seriously, Next is the most important time for kinship. Today is the first time my silly boy is forging. It's as important as the school's parent-teacher conference. How can I be late? Chapter 606. In the face of such a serious reason, Russell found himself speechless. The illusory figure had dissipated again, turning into a pitch-black bird. It spread its wings and nimbly passed through layers of blockades and defenses. It flew across a long distance and returned to the sky of the ivory tower. After finding the right position, it fell down. It penetrated through layers of walls. It descended from the sky and came to the tightly sealed alchemy workshop. Then it saw the riot of darkness. Despair was shrinking. Under the transformation of the alchemy fire and the hand of imprisonment, it gradually changed qualitatively and took shape again in Huaishur's hand. Between his 5 fingers that had turned into steel, the originally heavy iron ingot had condensed into an illusory outline, which he held tightly. In the forger's furnace, the source substance and the iron began to transform again. Gradually, it became clearer and clearer. The outline of a sharp blade appeared. At that moment, the countless despair that was madly multiplying and spreading in the air suddenly shook. Then it was pulled by an invisible force, collapsing and contracting inwardly. The sharp sound of steel growing burst forth. In Huaishi's hand, the metal crystal was multiplying, moving forward and extending rapidly. Despair was given a body, hatred was given a blade, and curses were given a form. The darkness disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. And with the burning of the alchemy fire in Huaishi's hand, a pitch-black sharp blade finally appeared with its own ferocious outline. The wail of the secret instrument cracking spread. The sharp aura came from it, and in the blink of an eye, it brought a chilling sense of oppression. It was as if there were tangible slashes bursting out from the ground and walls. Oh. Usually, Du did not care about the sharp aura leaking from the secret instrument. He widened his eyes and stepped forward, almost lying in front of the boundary, staring at the weapon in Huaishi's hand. How fierce, how wonderful! A sharp blade that can compete with the Muramesa. Is this the technology left behind by the forgers? The old man's eyes burned with fanatical flames, staring at the sharp blade in Huaishi's hand that was gradually dimming. He was so excited that he almost danced with joy. In the flowing darkness, a cold and slender blade appeared from Huaishi's hand and extended forward. After crossing an exaggerated scale, it outlined a sharp outline. That was a tachi. But even if it was a tachi, this length was too exaggerated. With just a glance, Yi Zichen was able to get the exact data. 7 feet, 9 inches, 6 fun. The old alchemist's eyes swept across the blade, staring at every detail on it. Is this the shape of the Imperial God Sword? It's truly an eye-opener. However, before he could finish his sentence, a cracking sound was heard from Huaishi's hand. Everyone froze in place. In Huaishi's hand, the odachi, which was astonishingly long, had actually shattered. It broke from the middle, and then shattered into thousands of pieces, flying in all directions, quickly blurring and dimming. In the end, it disappeared without a trace. Ping Du stood rooted to the ground, as if he had been petrified. He found it hard to accept such an outcome. Failed. No, it's the opposite. In the corner, Fei Niao's silhouette smiled. It's a success. At that moment, Huaishi finally raised his hand. The banner unfolded, and the bone-burying sanctuary opened with a bang. The billowing darkness, accompanied by the overwhelming tide of steel, crows roared out. But this time, the crow tide that blotted out the sky and covered the earth no longer reflected the metallic light. Instead, it had returned to the chaotic darkness of the past. However, this darkness was far too ferocious. The once desperate frenzy emerged again. The steel crows spread their wings, and their bodies were wrapped in a substantial darkness. Their scarlet eyes were full of ferocity. When they hissed, the sharp sound tore through the fragile protection and spread in all directions. Greedy predation. In the blink of an eye, within hundreds of meters of the entire laboratory, all the abyssal sediment, all the unknown things, and all the creeping erosive species lurking in the shadows were completely devoured by the crows. And when Huaishi raised his hand, the mighty tide of crows gathered. After the shackles of the form were undone, countless heavy steel feathers fell and returned to Huaishi's hand again. The texture of the feathers overlapped, forming a complicated and solemn blade pattern. The blade that grew and extended like a machine formed a slender arc. The ferocious blade appeared again. The curse turned into a fierce blood color flowing on the blade from top to bottom, dripping and spreading, and finally dissipating in the air. Scarlet marks were left behind. It's a success. Huaishi waved the ferocious iron in his hand and smiled happily. But when he looked back, he saw that his students were retreating in horror. Only the old Ping Shi raised his head and stood in place excitedly, staring at the evil spirit in his eyes. That's right, it was the ferocious ghost walking in the human world. It was unaware of how terrible it was at the moment, and even smiled. It walked forward in the bloody shroud, holding a sharp blade that slaughtered lives. It was just like the legendary king of the great rivers and mountains strolling on the road of the capital of peace, killing and destroying everything. Stepping on the corpses, it brought despair. That would be too wonderful. Name. His lips trembled with excitement, and he couldn't wait to step forward, wanting to know, does it have a name? Mr. Huaisher. Huaisher froze for a moment and looked down at the weapon in his hand. Name? On the blade, there were vague and ancient characters appearing. It was the blessing left by the former forgers. In the world, only Huaisher could understand the language. If it was described in the language of the present, there were only 4 words. Birth, old age, illness, death. This was the essence born from endless despair. Resentment. Next to him, a familiar voice sounded. Let's call it resentment. Dead silence came in an instant. A strange figure appeared beside Huaisher, took the odachi from his hand, waved it twice, and nodded happily. For a novice, this is a rare and excellent result. Well done, Huaisher. Yuan's eyes widened, stunned and in disbelief. Who was that woman? Why did she seem to be very familiar with her teacher? They even put their arms around each other's shoulders. And she wanted to be close to Huaisher. She subconsciously reached out to touch her waist, but found that she didn't bring Yamagata with her when she went out. Even Huaisher was stunned, looking at Tangi in front of him. He didn't know why she suddenly appeared in front of others. But when she looked over with a smile, he felt helpless. Well, she probably came out to play when she was in the mood. Then Tangi raised her hand and snapped her fingers. Time seemed to freeze in an instant. She pressed the pause button. She turned around and looked at Huaisher mischievously. What's wrong? You look like you saw a ghost. No, I'm just not used to you appearing outside. Huaisher shook his head and looked around. Is it okay? What if it is? Tangi leaned closer and looked into his eyes. It may be very troublesome if the news is leaked. Will you help me kill her? You're daydreaming. Huaisher rolled his eyes. You're hopeless. Just wait for death. Goodbye. All right, let's stop joking around. As your contractor, this is the first time you've created such an excellent product, so I have to share it with you. Toheim lowered her head as she fiddled with the odachi, grudge, which was a head taller than her. She commented excitedly, I can give you full marks for the usage of the alchemy fire and the confinement hand, but the forger's furnace isn't something that's easy to use. If there's a slight mistake, it can be considered inexperience, but it can be made up for. The final result, without a doubt, is a top grade. She looked up and looked at the man in front of her with a gratified smile. Congratulations, Huaisher, you are already an excellent alchemist. It's still far from that. Huaisher shook his head. You said it yourself, it's resentment, right? It's not despair. Although the result was still excellent, it was still a little short of perfection. It couldn't be restrained from radiating resentment into restrained despair. It was a loss of purity. This point could be made up for in the future. The forger's skill is better than the alchemist's in that it can continuously improve on the work. It's not like the alchemist's, where the final result is determined the moment it comes out of the furnace. Tangi sighed. Also, don't make a mistake about who you're comparing to, Huaisher. Whether it's the ivory tower, the iron crystal throne, or the Stoneforge Society, the alchemists you've seen are all geniuses among geniuses. They are 1 in a million, and there are even alchemists who are unattainable. It's not wrong to have high standards, but if your eyes are always looking up, living will be very tiring. You didn't go through a lot of practice and tempering since you were young, and you don't have the enormous amount of effort they poured into pursuing miracles. To be able to stand side by side with them with your mediocre talent in alchemy is already enough to show how precious your results are. As she spoke, the odachi in Tangi's hand once again scattered into countless feathers and disappeared into the air. Huaisher felt another fierce origin substance equipment appear in his soul. Huaisher was stunned, and he couldn't help but frown. How is it? You should have noticed it by now, right? Tangi asked. Huaisher nodded. It wasn't just the odachi. Almost all of the weapons, including the rage axe, still had the energy to go one step further. What shocked him was that he had originally thought that the virtuous sword would have the highest degree of completion among all of the origin substance equipment. But now it seemed that it was the rope of sorrow. Not only that, but in terms of degree of completeness, the rope of sorrow was just a step away from completely becoming a physical relic. Even after Huaisher died, it would still be able to continue existing. It was hard to understand, but it was indeed different from the other weapons. Huaishir finally remembered the spoils of war he had obtained in Yamatai City. When he had accepted Kitten's request to kill the other princes, it had been given to him as an advance payment. It was a chain that had fused with the rope of sorrow. Chapter 607. What the hell is this? Huaishir raised his hand, and the heavy chain emerged from the void. It was shrouded in sparks and black smoke. Its outline appeared. It had already completely merged with his source equipment, and there was no distinction between them. Just this one item made the completion of the sorrowful rope far ahead of other weapons. Even the Tachi of resentment that Huaishir had created using the creator's memories could not catch up. It was because of this that Huaishir was extremely surprised. An invitation from Helios. Tangi said, "It's the starting point of the alchemist's pilgrimage. Basically, every alchemist should have heard of its existence and have some fear and longing for it. Even a great grandmaster can do it. Even a great grandmaster grew up step by step from an apprentice, right?" Tangi thought for a moment and said, "As far as I know, Mikhail did not accept Helios' invitation, but another great grandmaster of the Stone Cauldron Society, Garland, did go. Anyway, the chain you got from Kitten is a mission item. Once triggered, it will generate a legendary mission called Helios' Wish." Huaishir's expression twitched. "Kitten, that bastard." All the mission rewards given were F*King props from other missions. Thinking about it carefully, whether it was the identity card, the Nibelungen, or the chain, none of them were freaking easy. At that time, he was so happy that he thought he had taken advantage of it, but he did not expect that this bastard had sold him out. Fortunately, he had taken back the title of prince, so it was not too much of a loss. But no matter what, he would have to settle this account with Kitten in the future. After scratching his head, Huaishir let out a long breath and calmed down. "So, a Helios invitation is a chain? To be precise, it is a puzzle that is casually scattered across the entire realm, casually squandering miracles like rain. The invitation itself is a perfect relic carrier, an empty shell." After saying that, Tangi smiled. "Before that, let's talk about Helios. Helios Workshop, Helios War Chariot. Do you know anything about them?" One of the legendary top 10 workshops." Huaishir scratched his head and said, "It's even one of the top few workshops, but not many people know about it. That's why you're still too biased in this subject. This should be common knowledge for alchemists." "Well then, let's start from the beginning." Tangi leaned back and sat on the invisible sofa and chair as if she had fallen to the ground. She put on a comfortable posture and began to speak, ignoring the fact that Huaishir was still standing there in a daze. And Huaishir was not to be outdone. He sneered, sat back in the air, and leaned back on the invisible chair. He even crossed his legs, leaned back comfortably, and crossed his arms. Even Tangi froze in place, stunned. "How did you do it?" "Horse stance." After a long time, Huaishir squeezed out a few words from between his teeth and looked away awkwardly. His face was already red. "Ha ha ha ha." Tangi was already laughing unceremoniously. She was almost wiping her tears. She leaned forward and back and was overjoyed. Forget it. You'd better sit here. This is the first time someone has done the horse stance in front of me. I can't go on at all." As she spoke, she pointed to the empty air beside her. Huaishir propped himself up with one leg and finally breathed a sigh of relief. Then he looked at the air beside Tangi and reached out to touch it. He vaguely felt the touch of sofa. He pressed twice, and it was indeed a sofa. What's the principle behind this? Invisible things and visible things. It's just a little alchemy trick. Don't look at it. You won't be able to learn it. Tangi rested her chin on her elbow and smiled. Huaishir thought for a while and sat down tentatively. He sat firmly, right beside her. Then he felt a little stiff. "Aren't you going to sit closer?" Tangi looked at him and asked curiously, "You're almost sitting outside, right?" "Nonsense." Huaishir sat upright and looked straight ahead. "Are you still going to speak?" He shouldn't have sat here. It felt more tiring than the horse stance. "Okay, were we just now? So you're just teasing me, right?" Huaisha reminded her unhappily, Helios. Yes, Helios. As if ignoring what happened, Tangi leaned on the armrest that only she enjoyed and said lazily, "It's indeed one of the top 10 workshops, but in essence, it doesn't belong to anyone. It doesn't even have any resident alchemists. It's a miracle that can put itself above countless alchemists, a relic that once belonged to the authority of Olympus. Some may think that it's the chariot of Helios, the sun god, but in fact, it's Helios himself. Do you understand?" Huaisha looked at her blankly and quickly looked away. "What do you mean?" "It means that Helios, the god, doesn't exist at all. It's the legendary sun chariot of Apollo. It's the carrier of the sun that was once cast by the Olympian gods. It once represented the authority of the sun, the miracle of Olympus. Is this clear enough?" Huaisha was stunned for a long time and finally reacted. "Yes, that's why it could continue to exist after the fall of the gods. From its nature, you can think of it as a cosmic space station that operates in the orbit of the solar system, flying in the cold universe. Every 71 years, it will cross the orbit of Earth, allowing alchemists to visit it. Although this huge scale of space is meaningless, it does imitate the movement of the sun and thus obtains a huge amount of power. It's not an exaggeration to call it the incarnation of the sun. It's a war weapon created by the Olympian gods to deal with the danger of hell. It's said that a superweapon that can destroy a continental plate with one hit. Isn't it awesome? It doesn't sound real. Would the Astronomical Society allow such a thing to exist? Of course not, but long before the Astronomical Society was established, no, long before the fall of the Astronomical Society, it was damaged by a passing bad thing. So, foreigners are not good people. No matter how enthusiastic they are, there should be a limit. If those guys had been a little vigilant, it wouldn't have ended up like this. Huaisha did not understand the second half of the sentence at all, but it was not the first time that Tangi talked to herself like this. He just treated it as the dark history of Olympus. In other words, Helios is currently in a damaged state. Almost 90% of its functions are gone. Tangi shrugged. So, Helios' remaining instinct chose to repair itself. But unfortunately, Hephaestus no longer exists, so it can only be done by others. That's why there are invitations. Through its own orbit, every time it gets close to the sun, it produces a large number of semi-finished products in batches, and then throws them to the present and hell to generate a large number of invitations. Any alchemist who wants to set foot on Helios can modify the invitation and record the miracle of their smelting in the blank relics. It's like continuing your own creation on a half-completed painting. As long as you can achieve a perfect rating, you will be regarded as a guest worthy of being invited by Helios and get the qualification to go on Helios. And then you have to undertake the maintenance work, Tangi said with a calm face. They are looking for someone to repair the sewer pipe. Do you think they will invite you for tea? But for any alchemist, being able to come into contact with the creation of the gods is already a great opportunity, not to mention being able to participate in it. If you can finish the work within a month of the intersection of the tracks, then you can get off the train with a thank you gift. If you can't, then you have to finish your part. But once the train stops, it's not easy to get off. Do you understand? Huaisha swallowed his saliva. Think about it. An alchemist was carried by a cold chariot, sailing in the cold universe, separated from everything by the vast darkness and despair. In the present, far away on the scale of astronomy, waiting for the next meeting after 70 years. If you ask me, some alchemists can't wait to stay a little longer. Tangi shrugged. They don't want to get off the train when they arrive at the station, so they deliberately stay there. Over time, because of the research on Helios, a group has formed inside, which is what we call the Helios Workshop. But the only one who can really represent the Helios Workshop is Helios itself. Then after so many years, is there any progress in the maintenance? About 30%? Tangi said indifferently. The material is rare. Sometimes, Helios' own projections are like taxis working everywhere in hell, so it's not surprising to meet them. The moment you put it that way, it really lowers my status. Anyway, this is your chance. Tongi's words made Huaishi's heart skip a beat. You've received their gifts for so long. I'm afraid you're already on the list, right? I have to go up and fix the water pipes. Huaishi's eyes widened. What are you afraid of? With the skills of the forger, you won't have to worry about not being able to fix it when the tracks of Helios convert a year later. Tongi glanced at him. Besides, there's still a year. A year later, you might be at grade 5. Don't say that advancing to grade 5 is as easy as eating and drinking, okay? I'm only at grade 3. Huaishi's eyes widened. Moreover, you forced me to advance by 1 grade, so I need more experience than others for no reason. Don't worry, as long as the Kun has a breakthrough, young Arbiter Ming's destiny will grow very quickly. As for Great Arbiter Ming, you've killed countless people in hell and exterminated an entire hell. How many correction points did you get? As long as you use the secret method to convert it, you'll be able to skip the early and middle stages and directly jump to the late stages. When the materials for advancement are more or less prepared, you can consider advancing to grade 4. Tongi counted with her fingers and patted Huaishi's shoulder proudly. Look at how meticulous your sister's plans are. Yeah, you're really meticulous. From the beginning to the end, you've arranged everything clearly. Huaishi rolled his eyes. Tongi leaned closer and smiled. Are you angry? Huaishi looked away and leaned back. I'll fall if I move any further. I'll get into a horse stance. Huaishi held his breath angrily and squeezed out the words from between his teeth. Tongi's laughter became even more joyful. All right, it's almost time. I'll go back first. She reached out and pulled Huaishi up from the ground. You're already a teacher. Don't be so childish. Huaishi sighed and waved his hand, indicating for her to leave quickly. But Tongi stayed where she was and looked at him. Suddenly, she said, There's one more thing that I haven't told you. Huaishi was puzzled. She reached out her hand and ruffled Huaishi's hair with lightning speed before he could react. Her smile was bright and dazzling. You've grown, Huaishi. She said, Congratulations. Huaishi was stunned. Then goodbye. She winked at the contractor in front of her and turned to leave. Her figure disappeared into the air. Soon, the frozen time resumed its flow. It was as if everyone had forgotten about the illusion that disappeared and did not notice that they had lost 10 minutes. They only saw Huaishi standing where he was thoughtfully and looking in another direction. He was silent and did not speak. Teacher. Lin Shurjiu looked at Huaishi in confusion and reminded him softly, Are you okay? Ah, sorry, I was stunned for a moment. Huaishi came back to his senses and smiled at them. I remembered something happy. In the silence, Yuan looked at that smile and felt sad for no reason. Du was still standing quietly in the corner. His stooped body was stiff, and he was already sweating. He did not know what had happened at all, but he felt a stinging pain in his eyes. It was as if, for a moment, the tyrannical sun had descended here and coldly ravaged the pair of eyes that had seen too many miracles. It left a deep burn mark in his eyes like the sun. It did not even give him a reason to be afraid. It just indifferently gave him a punishment. Tell him, you should bow down. Chapter 608. All in all, Huaishi was in a very good mood now. Although he didn't admit that he was very happy to be praised by his big sister. In any case, getting a new weapon was something worth celebrating. However, the weapon didn't feel real just by holding it in his hand. Therefore, of course, he had to find someone to test it on. Then, there was a problem. Huaishi wasn't crazy enough to find students in the school in the middle of the night to randomly kill. The records in the Book of Destiny were enough for practice, but it didn't give Huaishi too much pressure. Therefore, he could only find someone from the people around him. Yuan? He looked at the girl in the gray skirt behind him, who was unhappy for some reason, and immediately felt a pain in his conscience. Huaishi, what are you thinking? That's your student. Then, Lin Shurjiu. Therefore, the little hut in the forest inexplicably trembled under the teacher's loving gaze and squeezed out a smile with difficulty. Huaishi also squeezed out a smile. Then he sighed. Forget it. She looked pitiful and couldn't fight very well. Bullying little Shurjiu didn't have any sense of existence. Then, there was only one choice among the acquaintances in the school, He took out his phone, opened the address book, and then dialed a number. "Hello." He smiled and asked, "Is Raymond there?" Bullseye, before the flail with a strange accent could speak halfway, it was snatched by Raymond. "Hello? What's the matter?" "I just remembered that you were discharged from the hospital." Huaisher lowered his head and smiled at the bloody long knife in his hand. "I arranged a rehabilitation exercise for you." "Awesome." Half an hour later, Raymond, who was taken to the overhead classroom, was still holding a hamburger in his hand. He looked at Huaisher, who had already begun to warm up, and was stunned. "I saw you ready to hit me as soon as I came in," he asked in surprise. "You call this rehabilitation exercise?" "It's just exercise," Huaisher said with a smile. "Isn't it because I'm afraid that you'll get sick from boredom? Besides, with your skills, you shouldn't be afraid of this, right? I'm just a driver. Don't spout nonsense." He looked at Lin Shurgio and Yuan and said, "Hey, are you going to use me to teach the students? I'm warning you, I will complain." How long had it been since Jacob had been dragged to the guillotine? "Do you still have a conscience? He's still watching you from the Capitol." "Sorry, I didn't want to do that, but he's just too weak," Huaisher said. "Don't worry, I'm just trying out my new weapon. I can't bully a student, right? Is it okay to bully me? You borrowed money from me last time and then bet on my business. Are you going to consider sharing some with me?" "Sorry, the wind was too loud. I didn't hear you clearly," Raymond replied with a serious face. He raised his hand and patted his shoulder. "Isn't it just a sparring partner? Come, ravage me mercilessly." He finished his hamburger in a few bites, then took off his leather jacket and threw it to Lin Shurgio. Then, he entered the venue in a singlet. Muscles. When the leather jacket was taken off, anyone would notice Raymond's muscles. They weren't exaggerated. In fact, they weren't very developed. However, the division and combination of the muscles, the scars on them, and the flexibility and ease of control were enough to make one feel a sense of valiance. Between his 5 fingers, the muscles in his palms jumped flexibly. As his body warmed up, the muscles all over his body rippled like water. Heat was rising, because his body temperature was rising. This was different from the drummers and use steps origin substance application technique. In a literal sense, it increased the body's heat and increased the supply from the source, thereby exploding with a powerful force. Elder Luo's explanation was very thorough. There are only so many techniques in the world. The basic techniques are the straight punch, the jab, the kick, and so on. No matter how strange the techniques developed from this foundation, in the end, they all came from the same source. For example, the performance technique itself was through the changes in rhythm and weapons, reinterpreting the music. However, it was still built on the combination of the drummer and used steps. For example, the heretic king, who was so strong that he was unreasonable, all he needed was a serious punch to break through a city. No matter how many changes there were, it still remained the same. The drummer and used steps focused on the use of muscles. Thus, after combining them, one could freely control the muscles all over the body and enter a state beyond the limit. The technique that Redmond was displaying was to increase the supply of heat to his body. Through the strengthening of his body, he was able to vent out the heat from his body. One was to increase the efficiency of the utilization, and the other was to increase the upper limit of the output. Of course, both sides took care of each other, but the main point was still different. If one wanted to have both, then they were destined to fail. Making a choice was the wisest method for an ascender at this stage. Raymond's warm-up posture and movements had already exceeded Huaisher's expectations, raising him to the level of a powerful enemy. There was even a faint shadow of a certain person, the existence on the Ivy League flagship that gave Huaisher immense pressure. The level 4 Azura Everly. "You're really close to the Eye of Nightmares," Huaisher exclaimed. "Not at all. It's just some basic skills that can be seen everywhere. Don't worry about it." Raymond waved his hand with a smile. "Shouldn't we announce the rules first? If you pull out that pistol, I'll immediately lie on the ground and surrender, then write a report letter. Don't worry. Beelzebub probably doesn't have time now." Huaisher looked up and glanced at the Lord of the Flies, who was happily talking to Lien Shackle outside the arena. He could not help but shake his head. Can we fight with weapons without using stigmata and soul power? Isn't that still bullying? How many weapons do you have? Besides, what's that move called? Whether it's Cord or Xiang Dragon, it's not something you can take out, right? Don't worry. Just one today. Huaishir opened the burial sanctuary with a smile. In the overwhelming crow tide, a blood-colored crow feather Tachi slowly grew out. It was a terrifyingly long sword, hatred. Thus, under the blood-colored shroud, the ferocious ghost god reappeared. It's useless to say more, he said. Let's begin. Raymond was dumbfounded. He did not understand why Huaishir suddenly changed his style and became a ferocious solidifier. He pointed to Huaishir's side in disbelief. Wait, it's fine if you hit me, but why did you call Andrea to watch? Huaishir frowned and wanted to turn around, but there was no one behind him. It was at that moment that a loud sound burst out. It was like a burning chariot advancing in an instant. The earth shook and Raymond was already close. The heavy halberd pulled out from the empty classroom, slashed down, and pure enormous power operated in it. His movements were unbelievably fast. At this moment, he was the incarnation of the chariot of fate. The halberd roared. It pierced through Huaishir's chest, tore the bones, and dug out a big, hideous hole. Killed in one blow. The first round was over. Huaishir lowered his head in a daze, looked at the gap in his chest, and then looked at the middle-aged, muscular man in front of him. Wow, you're so despicable in a spar? Going all out is respecting the opponent. Raymond pulled out the halberd, slowly retreated 20 steps away, and hooked his finger at Huaishir. Come on, hero. Isn't this a rehabilitation exercise? You have to do something exciting, right? That's what you said. Huaishir sighed and twisted his neck. A cracking sound was heard as the joints rubbed against each other. Then, he suddenly disappeared on the spot. It was not that Huaishir had disappeared. It was that he was too fast. Raymond was engulfed by a chill. He subconsciously wanted to retreat, but the hideous smile, bathed in blood, was already close at hand. Raven feather Tachi, hatred swept across. In a flash, Huaishir appeared behind Raymond. The blood on the blade dripped and dissipated in the air. The second round was over. A red line suddenly appeared on Raymond's neck. Then it broke cleanly and fell to the ground, still blinking blankly. It was hard to understand. The severed head's lips were still moving. Why are you so fast? Huaishir lowered his head and looked at his broken trousers and his swollen calf. He looked back at him and showed the same gentle smile as Luo Xian. This skill is very simple, he said. Just do it when the air is not paying attention. What the hell? Raymond opened his eyes wide. He even forgot to pick up his head from the ground. He finally felt the same sense of sluggishness as Huaishir. Are you stupid, stinky brother? This was the Orchard School's secret technique, taking advantage when XX is not paying attention. In fact, it was just the 5 steps of you that surpassed Huaishir's limit. In the end, he didn't even touch the edge of Senior Sister. His kneecaps were already broken. If it weren't for the empty classroom, he would probably have to go back and rest for a long time. But this would also lose the meaning of sparring, right? The empty classroom restarted. Huaishir returned to the original place, stretched his body, and entered the state of exceeding the limit again. He hooked his finger at Raymond. Again, in silence, Raymond touched his neck, took a deep breath, held up the heavy halberd again, and assumed a charging posture. A short sword quietly appeared at his waist. He began to get serious. The ground cracked again. The chariot started and rumbled forward. The hurricane came with the halberd. The strong wind had already stung Huaishir's face from a distance. The Tachi swept and slashed. Then there was a burst of thunder. Raymond's flushed face suddenly opened, and he let out a roar like a lion. It was as if there was a physical wave of air mixed with the fluctuations of origin substance. It shook one's consciousness, forming a frightening aura comparable to that of thunder. If it were a normal person, their origin substance would have been destroyed by this roar, and they would have been turned into a vegetable. Huaishir's movements, however, only paused for a moment. A moment was more than enough. The halberd instantly shattered the Tachi's sweep. Raymond closed in, and he let go of the halberd. His left hand pulled out a short sword from his waist, and in this moment of crisis, stabbed towards Huaishi's heart. Bang! The sharp sound of metal scraping against metal could be heard. Sparks flew. This is Raymond's pupils dilated. The tachi in Huaishi's hand, which was originally incomparably long, had shrunk to the size of a wakizashi. He raised it from his hand, blocking the incoming dagger. Immediately afterwards, Huaishi raised his right hand, and his 5 fingers clenched tightly. The heavenly drum sounded. Raymond's body slid backwards, and the imprint of a fist appeared on his raised arm. I forgot to tell you. Huaishi smiled slightly. The length can be adjusted, and by the way, amidst the sharp sound of growing iron crystals, the blood-colored katana in his hand suddenly extended forward. After crossing a long distance, it pierced straight through Raymond's chest and came out from his back. Then, Huaishi's voice followed closely behind. Its maximum length is 9 meters. Chapter 609. Imperial Divine Blade, Hatred. The weight of 3 strokes, 5 caddies, 1 tail, 6 centimeters, remained constant. Normally, the blade was 6 feet long, but according to the user's will, it could freely extend and contract between 4 inches and 119 feet, 3 inches and 1 minute. It was truly a must-have item for traveling, killing people, and gifting to friends and family. Those who received it were usually moved to the point of tears. Just like right now, Raymond was already shedding tears of grief and indignation. After piercing through his opponent's body like a bolt of lightning, it quickly retracted and returned to Huaishi's hand, returning to the length of a normal blade. It was the most suitable size for Huaishi to use. As expected, this was the best. Unfortunately, the blade didn't manage to pierce through Su Chen's heart. Su Chen's hidden trump card had been seen through at the last moment. It had probably pierced through his lungs, but his organs hadn't been damaged. To an ascended cultivator, this wasn't a big deal. Unfortunately, Raymond was somewhat flustered as he covered his wound, missing the opportunity to counterattack. He quickly realized that this was a virtual classroom, so he didn't have to worry about the curse in his body leaking out. He shook his head self-mockingly and sighed in relief. His eyes, however, were filled with tears. He couldn't help it. This was because the pain he felt wasn't from the blade's wound, but rather from the infection caused by the poisonous origin substance in his chest. It wasn't the hatred within Huaishi's origin substance, but rather some sort of natural reaction. It was some sort of pain left over from the past. He had been a motherless child since he was young, wandering the borders, risking his life for so many years without any good results. In order to save his partner, he had even become a traitor. He didn't have much time left and was about to die, but he still had a large loan that he couldn't repay. He had no choice but to stay in the ivory tower as a tool. He had finally managed to ask for leave to travel, but when he returned, he was cut down. This kind of life was so shameful, so empty, and so meaningless. Birth, old age, sickness, and death. Living was just too painful. He wanted to die. He wanted to involuntarily throw himself in front of that blade and let it end his life, just like he had done to the samurai, bringing his last bit of dignity with him as he cut off his head. Everything was over. He wanted to be free. When Raymond finally realized what was going on, he looked at Huaishi with tears in his eyes, which were full of shock and fear. "Where did you get such an evil thing?" Huaishi looked down at the knife in his hand and thought for a moment. "Someone gave it to you. Do you like it?" "I like it." He loved it to death. She loved him so much that she wanted to die. How dare you force a middle-aged man to recall his dark past? Raymond raised his hand and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, ignoring the tears in his eyes. How dare you use such a dirty thing on a lowly social animal? Are you ready to pay the price? Although the corners of his mouth still carried a trace of his usual frivolous smile, his eyes had become tranquil. It was as silent as iron. Without a doubt, he became serious. Huaishi thought for a moment and said seriously, "If I have offended you in any way, I can apologize." "No need, because you will regret it very soon." Enveloped by the heat, Raymond, who had been burned red, grinned. His blood turned into mist and rose into the air. In an instant, he was within reach. Iron light and hurricane swept across. A roar burst forth. It was as if an angry heavy truck had crashed head-on with a hurricane, crushing the walls, obstacles, and everything else that was not worth mentioning. Fleischer slid back more than 10 meters. The resentment in his hand kept shaking. The web between his thumb and index finger holding the knife cracked, and wisps of blood seeped out. But it was not over. Raymond's movements did not stop at all. He had already pounced on him again. The halberd was straight and stabbed forward. Fleischer's lean-back body lowered unbelievably. Then, as if his muscles were contracting, he rubbed against the halberd like a spring full of power and pounced forward. You step, a flat stab. He was entangled. The iron ball covered with barbs was thrown out with iron chains and wrapped around the blade of Fleischer's sword. It pulled violently, and the instantaneous burst of power caused the blade to deviate. Raymond held the halberd with one hand and took out a flail with the other hand, locking the counterattack sword. At a very close distance, he smiled at Fleischer. "I'll show you the skills of the wild dog of war." As he spoke, he raised his head and smashed forward like a hammer, hitting Fleischer's head, causing his vision to turn black, and he lost his vision for a moment. But the resentment had already broken free from its restraints and shattered the iron chains. In this darkness where nothing could be seen, it broke the halberd in Raymond's hand by relying on the sound of the wind. The heavy weapon split into two from the middle. But when Fleischer opened his eyes, Raymond had already pulled out a brand new weapon from the empty classroom. It was so familiar in shape. It was the Teuton greatsword that was exactly the same as Avery's. With the heavy sword in hand, Raymond's aura became more and more violent. In a state of blood ignition, he raised the sword high and slashed down at Fleischer's head. Justice descends from the heavens. Steel intersected in the air and rubbed against each other. Sparks burst out and illuminated the eyes of the two. The hurricane whistled past. Then, everything returned to silence. It came to an abrupt end. Fleischer's right arm, which had been cut off by the heavy sword, fell to the ground, but his head wasn't chopped off as expected. Instead, the blade that pierced through Raymond's head was still between blood and bone. In the third round, the outcome was decided. The empty classroom was reset, but the thrilling moment just now still lingered in Fleischer's body and hadn't dissipated. He had underestimated the threat of Raymond's explosive state and had almost been killed by a series of consecutive moves. Although his speed and strength had increased qualitatively in the explosive state of blood ignition, that set of well-tempered attacks was flawless. He was in a stable and invincible position. In the worst-case scenario, they would just perish together. If it wasn't for the fact that the blade could retract freely, he wouldn't be able to make it in time even if he exceeded the limit. In a daze, he almost thought that the person standing in front of him was that old man, Avery, who had walked out a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. With the reset, Raymond appeared 20 steps away again. He twisted his neck happily and sighed softly. It's been a long time since I've had such a good fight. It's rare for me to be in such a good mood. Do you mind if I increase the difficulty for you?" "Please." Fleischer nodded. Thus, Raymond's hand swiped through the preset list of the empty classroom. Not long after, a full set of heavy armor, including his face, was included. There were still traces of swords and sabers on the heavy armor. The overlapping blood color dyed it black and red. There was a round shield fixed on the right arm, but the Eye of Nightmare emblem on it had been hung off with a sharp blade. What was left was only the faint outline of the dragon descendant knight. On the majestic lion helmet, two blazing breaths slowly exhaled. A pair of dark green eyes opened, carrying a smile and malevolence. How I missed the feeling of being young. There was no doubt that after returning to his peak and removing the influence of the curse, his body was as light as a dream. "Come, let's start the class, Teacher Fleischer." He twisted his neck happily and hooked his finger at the enemy in front of him. "The students are still watching. Don't hesitate for too long. Are you so cooperative?" Fleischer's resentment shook and shook off the remaining blood on the blade. After pondering for a moment, he finally raised his head and smiled. Then, let's talk about armor break in this lesson. The limit was activated. Amidst the rumbling, the blade of resentment, which had increased in size, whizzed over. An hour later, the sound of violent collisions in the empty classroom finally came to an abrupt end. When the empty scene dissipated, both of them were covered in sweat. It was a hearty spar and duel. But towards the end, even if they weren't afraid of death in the empty simulation, there wasn't much to gain from fighting. Thanks to Raymond's cooperation, Huaisher already knew the effects and various parameters of the Royal Divine Blade, resentment. As for the following cooperation between the young arbiter of life's stigmata and resentment, as well as the hidden changes, Raymond didn't want to be a target anymore. Every time he was hit, he would be forced to recall his own dark history. The shame and helplessness of wanting to die was unbearable. For the enemy, the effect of this blade was too despicable. Young people who hadn't experienced much might be less affected, but the more experienced they were, the harder it was for them to resist the helplessness and pain of life and death and pray for relief. After being hit, what they felt wasn't resentment, but a desire for death. If Raymond's feeling wasn't wrong, that blade should still have the effect of swallowing origin substance, but in essence, it was targeting his stigmata. It was just that the stigmata data in the empty classroom was fixed and couldn't affect it. That saber was alive. He could conclude that there was absolutely no mistake about this. Huaisher didn't deny this. When he waved his hand and dispersed resentment, the blade once again disintegrated into countless steel feathers and returned to the sacred burial ground. After being forged and smelted, the despair that had condensed into steel had been given to the entire flock of crows. At the same time, resentment had become the incarnation of the flock of crows. The casting of the same origin made this fusion so easy. Now, the fierce blade was the sharp claws of the flock of crows. In accordance with their instinctive desire for evolution, they were endowed with insatiable hunger and greed, and even dared to feed on disasters and miracles. This was the gift that the Sun Maker had left for Huaisher. As long as he accepted the Sun Maker's inheritance, there would be a grand path in front of him. The only problem was Huaisher scratched his head, feeling a loss. Where the hell was he going to find so many ascenders and consolidators for them to eat? Chapter 610. These days, it was getting harder and harder to raise crow. Huaisher actually started to reminisce about the past like an old man. Thinking about how simple it was before he evolved, he just had to show them a couple of paragraphs from his Book of Destiny every now and then. They would be very satisfied with that. But now, even small tomes couldn't satisfy them anymore. They wanted other people's lives. As for the one that liked to turn into a human and play with him recently, it wanted his life. Every time he saw a long list of deductions, Huaisher's heart would ache. If this continued, he suspected that he wouldn't be able to live for long. No matter how big his family business was, it couldn't be ruined like this. Huaisher didn't feel sad for long, because in the Cage of Dreams, the crow that hadn't eaten the origin substance or the stigmata for a long time had already begun to shout at the top of their lungs again. They wanted a reward. They wanted to watch a short movie from the Book of Destiny. Twice a day. That's all I can do. Huaisher flipped through the Book of Destiny for a long time and found a page to send in. In the end, the instinctive praises of the Book of Destiny were strange thoughts like, "That's it, so short, one more time," and so on. He didn't know where to learn this from. He didn't know why, but he felt like a has-been idol being despised by his fans. Life was hard. He sighed and looked away. "Let's go. It's time to eat," he said to Raymond. "It's rare for you to be so cooperative. I'll treat you. Little Yuan and 19 should come too." HM? Raymond, who was about to go back and eat instant noodles, had his eyes light up. He leaned over and asked in a low voice, "I heard that you're a VIP at Koei Lu. You're also a VIP at a few restaurants with hell ratings, the kind where you eat for free?" Huaisher couldn't help but roll his eyes. "What are you thinking? They're giving you face. Are you really going to go empty-handed? I'll personally cook soup for you. Do you dare to drink it? As long as it's not a rat, I'm fine with it." Raymond clicked his tongue and sighed. Don't try to fool me with an ordinary restaurant. I've lost dozens of pounds of blood today, and more than 10 heads have been broken. You're giving me this? All right, come to my house today. Huaisha rolled his eyes. Remember to eat less. Don't let Fong Shu cook too much. When he heard Raymond mention rats, he thought of the group of park guards that were brought back by the good brother from the legal department. Although it was just a shell, after gaining experience, Kitten would be able to replicate it again. It wouldn't be long before the park's debt collection army would start mass-producing What a Sin. Just as he was shaking his head and sighing, he saw a lonely figure walking out of the school office building. He wore a cyan Ingzhou robe, a braid that did not belong to the era, and a beard that seemed to have experienced the vicissitudes of life. He also had a saber that never left his waist. Sasaki-kun. His footsteps paused for a moment, and he asked with some concern, "Are you okay?" Sasaki Kayomesa, the external teacher of the Ingzhou Flower Path classroom, used to be the swordsmanship instructor of the Ingzhou Chinese clan and fought with Huaisha because of rumors. But he was basically a tough guy without any scheming. It was hard to imagine that he would be so sad. Did something happen in the Flower Path classroom? After a moment of silence, Sasaki showed a relaxed smile. Huaisha, Kuin, I'm no longer working in the Flower Path classroom. The next teacher will be the disciple of the Yamanaka professor. Ningzi is a good kid. Please take care of me in the future. Huaisha Kuin. Huaisha was stunned, and Sasaki was about to say something, but he was interrupted by Huaisha. It's time for dinner. Do you want to eat together? He pointed to the person behind him. If you don't mind, let's eat together. I still have half a bottle of good wine from Tengu Mountain at home. Sasaki was stunned and couldn't help but swallow. He wanted to refuse, but the good wine of Tengu Mountain was too fragrant. Then I'll accept it. The so-called friendship between men was just that. Although Sasaki and Raymond weren't familiar with each other before, they had 2 meals together, drank a glass of wine, and chatted. Boers and Boers always had a common language. One talked about racing, and the other talked about Flower Path. After getting drunk, who cared about that? The way they put their arms around each other's shoulders was so intimate that it was as if they were wearing the same pants. At least until they sobered up, they were still sworn brothers. Brother Raymond, you really don't remember anything? At the banquet that lasted from dinner to supper, Sasaki took off the robe that was in the way and nibbled on edamame as he asked curiously, "Don't you have any memory of what happened before you left the present realm?" "Oh, if you want to talk about it, there's a little." Raymond scratched his head and thought for a long time. "I only remember that I seem to be from the Russian Federation. No, I think I'm from Rome. Forget it. I can't remember at all. That's the same as not having any memories." Sasaki slammed the table. "If you ask me, you must be from Ingzhou. When you drink, you have the momentum of a sword master. There are no people with green eyes and yellow hair in Ingzhou." Raymond was confused for a long time. "Besides, I don't remember what the present realm looks like at all. Occasionally, I've only watched some movies, but I don't know much about it. After coming to the Ivory Tower, I've been running around the border. Not to mention Ingzhou, I haven't even been to Asia. Didn't you just say that you went on a trip?" "Yes, I went to Shambhala and had physical therapy there for a few days," Raymond said, and took out his mobile phone to show them. "Huaisha, the scenery of the places you recommended to me is really good." Huaisha looked at him and couldn't help but sigh. "It's really good. I've always wanted to go there once. I have a friend there. It's easy to go there. A round trip every 2 days. It's very fast. Next time? Forget it." Huaisha sipped his drink and couldn't help but sigh. "It's meaningless to go there. It's really sad to see a friend lying in the ICU. Besides, that guy doesn't want me to go and see him. He always says that it's too embarrassing. Wait, the one in the bed next to you. Wait, isn't this bastard fine?" He stared at him and leaned over. In the photo on Raymond's mobile phone, why did the slut in the hospital bed next to him look so familiar? "Is this your friend?" Raymond was also stunned. He looked at him and said, "Indeed, people like you should be able to get along well. But is there something wrong with your friend's brain?" At the mention of this, Raymond's expression became complicated. As if he recalled some inexplicable horror, he couldn't help but twitch. Once, I got up in the middle of the night and went to the toilet. I found that he wasn't in his bed. After I came out of the toilet, I found that guy hugging a vending machine and talking. What the hell? A vending machine? Raymond's face turned green when he said this. You didn't see it. That guy was talking to himself. Not only did he hug it, but he also wanted to kiss it. Sasaki was shocked. Wow, such a powerful pervert is rare even in Ingzhou. Mr. Sasaki, I understand your hometown feelings, but please don't compare everything with Ingzhou, okay? Huaishi's expression had become indescribable. He always felt that something was wrong. Did Mr. Liu's condition get worse during the period of recuperation? He used to think that there was something wrong with his brain, but he didn't expect that there was something wrong with his brain. Should he take some time to see him? However, speaking of which, your friend is really a powerful character. When we first met, he killed people like cutting melons and vegetables. It was completely abnormal. I was almost killed by him. Raymond said with emotion, Fate is really wonderful. You met before? Huaishi asked curiously. Raymond opened his mouth and was about to speak, but he was stunned for a long time and incredibly sobered up. He didn't say anything else, but made a zipping gesture at the corner of his mouth. Then, he lifted his hair and showed him the small mole scar behind his ear. That was the Continuing Academy's gag order. Phew, that was close. I almost exploded on the spot. Raymond grabbed the wine bottle and poured it directly. He picked it up and began to drink. Hurry up and calm me down. Huaishi's mouth twitched, but he didn't feel bad about the wine. He could just go back and bleed a little, and then go to Tengu Mountain to exchange for a few more bottles. Compared to this, he was more concerned about the gag order of the Continuing Academy. The gag order wasn't surprising. Many times, when the Astronomy Association carried out tasks, it would be imposed on the people involved. But the key was the Continuing Academy. There were basically no survivors of things that could alarm the Continuing Academy. Even if there were survivors, they would be taken away to live a carefree life in prison. It was a miracle that they could continue to jump around outside. If he had it, did that mean old Liu also had it? He instinctively felt how deep the water behind this was, but he didn't dare to ask again. If he asked too much about the Continuing Academy, it would be easy to get himself involved. Did you think the silencer's steal was a joke? Everyone wisely acted as if nothing had happened, and everyone continued to drink. When the banquet was about to end, Sasaki pondered for a long time, put down the wine glass, and suddenly got up. He put on his messy clothes, took a few steps back, and bowed. Thank you for taking care of me in the past. He said solemnly, your kindness to me, Sasaki Kaiomesa, will remember it in my heart. Huaishi looked at him blankly, unable to understand. What's the matter, Sasaki-san? He asked. Did something happen? Please speak frankly. If I can help, I will not hesitate to help. I'm not here to ask for help. Sasaki shook his head, straightened his body, and finally said what he had always wanted to say. In a few days, I will leave the ivory tower. Recalling the past few years in school, it was like a dream. I can't repay your deep kindness, and I am deeply ashamed. Okay, sit down first and talk slowly. After much persuasion, Huaishi finally managed to pin him down on the chair and ask for the reason. Speaking of this, the lonely look on Sasaki's face was swept away, and he was full of joy. Half a month ago, at the Ingzhou High Officials meeting, the previous impostor was deposed. He said excitedly, the return of the Rigian family is imminent, and it is said that Miss Hupa has also set off to return to Nara. As a retainer of the Rigian family, how can I stand by at such a critical moment? I must contribute my insignificant strength to the revival of the Rigian family. What? Huaishi was stunned. The information was too much, and he couldn't react. The first thought in his mind was, Hupo's stinky sister is going to be rich. Chapter 611. The head of the Lijian family was dismissed from the Ingzhou High Minister meeting, and Lijian Hupa set off for Ingzhou. Huaishi's mind was in a mess. Each of these 3 pieces of news was too complicated. It was only November. This year's High Minister meeting within the looming hall was brought forward. The head of the Lijian family was dismissed. Who dismissed him? Who had this qualification? Also, Li Jianhupa set off for Yingzhou. Wasn't Hupa now a non-staff employee of the Social Security Bureau? Why Nara? Shouldn't the fief of the Lijian family be in Anfang country? These three questions, each deeper than the other. He instinctively felt that there was endless calculation. The High Minister meeting was brought forward, indicating that the struggle between the Wu family and the Gong family had further intensified. There were only two people who had this kind of power in the House of the Fallen Inner House, and Hupo's movements had already indicated that the Social Security Bureau had begun to infiltrate Yingzhou. Huaisher could imagine how happy Xian Yao's old face was. Although it was possible that Hupa was not stained by the mud and had no private transactions with the Dongsha family, the problem was who would believe it. As the last son of the Lijian family, one of the direct descendants with the orthodox right of inheritance, from the day he left Dongsha, he was destined to be labeled as a traitor for the rest of his life. Huaisher could imagine what the Lijian family had become today. He didn't know how many people planned to swim naked in the muddy water and compete in fancy ways. They looked at Sasaki in amazement. This guy had been away for so many years, and now he wanted to go back at this juncture. He knew it was a trap, but he still jumped into it stubbornly. Have you really thought it through? He asked seriously. I haven't considered that kind of thing, Sasaki replied calmly. There has never been a need to consider it. From the day I joined the Lijian family, I have been prepared to sacrifice my life one day. As a samurai, there is no better result than this. After a long silence, Huaisher sighed. Don't sacrifice your life for nothing, okay? In my opinion, it's too stupid to sacrifice your life for an empty name. Although it's not appropriate to say this, Mr. Sasaki, the Riken family doesn't need you. The corners of Sasaki's mouth lifted, and he smiled happily. That's not too much, is it? Huaisher rolled her eyes and sighed. She didn't say anything else. She got up and took out another jar from the cabinet and placed it on the table. Although Mount Tiango sake is finished, Fengshu's homemade yellow rice wine is enough. Please, Sasaki-kun, this is the last thing I can do for you as a friend. Then, it would be impolite for me to refuse. Sasaki laughed and raised his glass again. Cheers! In the end, he collapsed after a few sips. He was addicted to food. The rest was drunk by Raymond. When he left, he carried the drunk Sasaki in one hand and 2 jars in the other. If Fengshu hadn't been so happy, Huaisher would have chopped off his hand. In the end, he left a mess for Huaisher. Fengshu had been busy all night and had been driven to rest by Huaisher. Fortunately, there were still 2 students who could help. 19 cleaned up the table, Yuan mopped the floor, and Huaisher wore an apron to tidy up the kitchen and wash the dishes. He was still full of resentment for Sasaki, who didn't listen to his advice. He murmured while washing, I don't know what he's thinking all day long. He doesn't know the value of life. He's only thinking about why he should treat the whole village to dinner. Little Yuan, 19, don't be such a person when you grow up. The 2 students looked at each other speechlessly. Well, I think you're the one who is least qualified to say such a thing, right? I'm bold because I'm skilled. How can you be compared with me? Huaisher turned back and rolled his eyes at them. With his level, he will be killed on the street sooner or later if he gets involved in this matter in Yingzhou. Isn't it better to live, well, than anything else? I really hope you can understand the same thing. 19 was bold. Huaisher looked back at him again. He was scared again, but it was too late. If you dare to argue with the teacher, I'll give you a supplementary lesson tomorrow. You can start with the kazoo if you don't know how to play the piano. Lin 19 held the mop and thought for a long time. Suddenly, he said, Great-grandfather told me before that people can't decide how they are born, but they can always decide how they die. I think Mr. Sasaki may not be unaware of the result of his trip this time. He said he may have been waiting for this day for a long time. Well, for the family, for the glory. Huaisher couldn't help but sigh. He finally remembered that his 2 students, one from the Jin family and the other from the Lin family, were all extraordinary and prestigious families. Both of them were recognized by the Astronomical Society as descendants of the Holy Name. Both of them had a sense of family honor that Huaisher couldn't match since they were young. It was needless to say that they would fight for the family. Huaisher couldn't imagine himself pulling out his sword and shouting for the Huai family and charging into the enemy's line. It was too funny, not to mention his parents. Even his grandfather didn't take the family's reputation seriously when he was still alive. If he died, then so be it. At least he left his grandson an old house. If he sold it in the future, he could eat and drink well for the rest of his life. He asked casually, "Are there many people like him in your family?" Yuan Yuan thought for a moment and replied, "There aren't many in the Jin family, and we don't have the habit of inviting guests from outside our family." Great-grandfather always said that the family is a matter for the elders to worry about. As long as the children don't embarrass the family, it's fine. You have to ask 19 about this. He's familiar with it. There's no such thing as glory in the Lin family. Lin 19 scratched his head and said helplessly, "Everyone is thinking about how to commit crimes in hell every day. Many of the elders don't have the surname Lin. Rather than saying that the family's unity comes from blood, it comes more from the Candle Dragon's destiny. It can't be used as a typical example. Well, one was a family that had been passed down for generations, and the other was simply an unorthodox family. Thinking about it this way, it was true that the Yin family's father was kind and the children were filial. Sensei, you don't have to take things too hard. Many ascendants in Yingzhou, especially the traditional ones, usually have a screw loose in their heads. It's normal for them to seek death all day long," Lin 19 said. "Moreover, Mr. Sasaki is willing to risk his life for the sake of the Riken family. He can already be considered loyal." Loyal? Huaisher thought for a moment and didn't say anything else. He lowered his head and washed the dishes. After cleaning up, Yuan Yuan and 19 said goodbye. After saying goodbye to Feng Shu, who was still flipping through books and studying recipes, the two of them set off on their way home. In the night, Yuan Yuan suddenly asked, "Is there something you didn't say just now? Aren't you the same?" Lin 19 looked back at her and said, "It's not that Sensei doesn't understand. He's just sad." Yuan Yuan didn't say anything. In comparison, I'm the one who really doesn't understand. Lin 19 walked in front, shaking his head and sighing. If Great-Grandpa said, "19, hurry up and come over. The Lin family needs you to shed your blood," I might go too, but it would be so embarrassing that I wouldn't be able to bear it. Scared. It's normal to be scared. Not everyone is like your Jin family. Going to the battlefield is like going to the mall. Sparta needs to be taught from a young age. Lin 19 paused for a long time and couldn't help but smile bitterly. Actually, the Lin family is similar, but I'm different. Since young, he had been alone, as if he was in a state of being left alone. No one cared about him. He did whatever he wanted. While everyone else was happily killing and setting fires, he was quietly exuding an annoying aura in a corner. No one cared. Yuan Yuan walked calmly at the back and suddenly said, "This may not be bad." Lin 19 was amused. "What's good about it?" Yuan Yuan thought for a moment and said seriously, "At least I don't want to kill you." Lin 19 rolled his eyes and didn't say anything. Inexplicably, he thought of the things that happened when he was young. At that time, there was only one television on the mountain. It was placed in front of Grandpa's room. Occasionally, everyone would pay attention to the Dongxia broadcast at night to keep up with the current affairs and learn from the advanced criminal experience of their foreign counterparts. Other than that, no one cared. Only Lin 19 would squat in front of the television at 6 o'clock in the afternoon. As long as the music played, the invincible warrior, the super soldier from space, the hope of mankind, the light energy condor would shine brightly on the stage. He would fight against the space army, the underground empire, Atlantis, and all the little monsters. "Grandpa, I want to be a hero when I grow up." The small house in the woods seemed to have said such a thing. Just when the family meeting asked everyone about their future ambitions, he stood up, posed as if he was shooting light rays, and said loudly, just like the light energy condor. He still remembered the dull look on his parents' faces, as well as the stunned faces of his uncles and aunts. It was as if he had said something wrong. Only Great-Grandpa smiled happily. He reached out and hugged him, encouraging him softly. "Then you have to work hard. It wasn't until a long time later that Lin 19 realized what a stupid thing he had said. No one would remember the bold words of a little kid after watching a cartoon. Even Lin Sergio had forgotten about it. Did great-grandpa still remember that kind of small thing? His footsteps suddenly stopped, and he lowered his head bitterly. He suddenly understood why Sasaki Kiyoshi smiled so happily. Perhaps even a wanderer warrior in dire straits would want to be a hero, right? Even if he couldn't become a hero, he would die like a hero. But I'm different. In the silence, he laughed softly, incomparably self-deprecating. This was a secret that Lin 19 had never spoken out since he was a child. The reason why he wanted to become the light energy condor was that his girlfriend's breasts in the anime were really big. I've decided. Lin 19's footsteps suddenly stopped, and his expression became serious. When Yuan looked back in confusion, she heard him shouting, "I must find a girlfriend with big breasts, otherwise it would be a loss." In the silence, Yuan began to look for her Yamanashi sword. Sure enough, she should first kill this embarrassing thing here and clean up the school for her teacher. Chapter 6:12. The next day, early in the morning, the weekly meeting in the teaching and research room. As usual, there was a lot of nonsense. Then there was the arrangement of academic affairs for the next week, the coordination of the internal affairs of the school, and many other trivial matters. These things had long been settled by the vice president. Now, at the meeting, it was announced to see who dared to stand up and speak up. Huaisher was still sitting in the corner like a salted fish. Headache. If he had known, he would not have drunk so much wine. After shrinking back a little, he lowered his head and pretended to be deep in thought, ready to take a short nap. But he noticed that there were frequent, unsettling gazes from the top. He looked up, and the sight disappeared. He looked down, and the sight disappeared. He looked up, and the sight disappeared again. He glared at Russell. What the hell was this old guy doing? But Russell was still drinking tea as if nothing had happened. It was full of arrangements. He snorted coldly and closed his eyes to rest. He looked as if he was not in the three realms, and it was futile. No matter what you arrange, don't expect me to respond. Finally, he heard a familiar voice from the top. Speaking of which, there's one more thing that I forgot to inform everyone. Russell put down his teacup and suddenly said, "Next month, our exchange with Kyoto University should also be on the agenda. We will set off this Friday with Mr. Isaac leading the team. In addition to the teams that have already been scheduled, in accordance with the principle of voluntary registration and participation, who would like to participate in the exchange." Although he said so, two eyes were staring straight at Huaisher. One was Russell, full of expectation, which meant, "What are you waiting for? Hurry up." The other was the vice president, full of disdain, which meant, "Go wherever you want, don't come." These two people stared straight at Huaisher. Huaisher, on the other hand, was wearing headphones, looking down at the music score in his notebook, as if he did not notice. After she calmly finished writing 2 pages, more and more people in the silent meeting room noticed the two people at the head of the table and looked over at Huaisher. Huaisher was still calm and collected. He was not moved at all, wanting to talk, dream on. However, Russell was not angry or anxious. Instead, he took the initiative to speak. With concern and expectation for the younger generation, he asked kindly, "Teacher Huaisher, as a disaster musician, don't you want to communicate with the Ingzhou Philharmonic Orchestra?" "I'm sorry, Principal." Huaisher raised his head and calmly retorted, "Their cellist skills are notoriously bad in the industry. There's nothing to talk about." Russell was stunned. "Is that so?" "Yes, that's right." Huaisher nodded solemnly, with a look that said, "I'm talking nonsense. I'm not going. Hit me if you have the ability. Since that's the case, let's have Teacher Huaisher guide him." Russell smiled and turned to the vice principal. "Write down his name. Motherf asterisk Kerr. Are you waiting for me here?" "Sorry, it's my ex-girlfriend's birthday next month, so I have to take annual leave to go to London." Huaisher made up a lie that he didn't even know what kind of lie it was, and sighed sadly. "Although I have lost this relationship, I hope there's still a glimmer of possibility to recover it. It doesn't matter, even if it's a wasted trip." Russell was shocked. "When did you have a girlfriend?" Huaisher smiled and raised his finger to point at his head. Principal, look at my face. Do I look like someone who can't find a girlfriend? Then, taking advantage of a short period of time when Russell was stunned, Huaisher immediately used a stomachache as an excuse to leave early and run away. Oh, I've grown up, Russell. You want to sit me up again? Dream on. In the afternoon, in the corridor outside the meditation room. Thank you for your long-term care, Professor. Sasaki knelt on the ground and bowed his head. Please forgive me for not staying long. Behind the paper door, an old voice coughed. Are you leaving now, Sasaki-kun? Sasaki didn't speak, but lowered his head and closed his eyes with guilt. It was difficult to repay the professor's kindness. Then go. Don't worry about me, an old man. Isn't this the so-called samurai? You have to set foot on the battlefield. The old man behind the paper door slowly got up and stared at the figure outside the door. After a long silence, the old man whispered, kindness is important, but I also hope that one day I could drink with Sasaki-kun again. Just like in the story, when it's over, you and I will meet again under the cherry tree, drink, sing songs, and laugh. We won't go home until we're drunk. Even if we can't make it in time, it doesn't matter if the cherry blossoms fail. Please come back safely. The old man didn't say the last sentence in the end. He just tidied up his clothes, propped up his decaying body, sat upright, and said goodbye to the friend he met in the mortal world. Take care of yourself. Sasaki didn't speak anymore. He got up and left. He was already in tears. After seeing Sasaki off at the station, Huaisher returned home. He was still immersed in the sadness of parting. Then, he saw the red letter on the table. Feng Shu, what's this? He scratched his head, instinctively feeling that something was wrong. I don't know. It was just sent by express. Feng Shu replied. I always feel that it's not a good thing. How about I throw it away for you? Huaisher frowned, lowered his head, and carefully looked at the letter on the table, turning it around. It was as if he was looking at a bomb package. There was something wrong with this thing. But as soon as he picked up the letter, it disintegrated in his hand, revealing an iron plate the size of a business card, branded with the logo of the Cooking Demon Competition Organizing Committee. Hell, Cooking Demon Competition designated. The first line of big words made Huaisher's eyes twitch. The aura of an arrangement came back again. Mr. Huaisher, according to the customer's special request, you have a cooking demon competition to be held in Nara, Yingzhou, in half a month. We hope that you can continue to promote Hell's food and beverage culture in the competition, creating new achievements and new heights. Hell Cooking Demon Competition Organizing Committee. In the silence, Huaisher's expression changed, as if on a color palette. Cooking Demon Competition designated. A designated task from the Hell Cooking Demon Competition Organizing Committee. Huaisher took a deep breath and roared at the sky. Russell, you old bastard. 10 minutes later, Huaisher finally finished cursing. He calmed down a little, pinched his chin, and thought for a while. Finally, he took out his phone and called Hupa. As if she had been waiting for a long time, the call was quickly connected. Stinky sister, who told you to call me? Huaisher asked bluntly. On the other end, Hupa was quite calm, and her answer was concise. Big cousin. Fine. Zhu Hongshan's arrangement was also on the way. What kind of shameful deal have the two of you made behind my back? Huaisher harumphed coldly. Sorry, but I'm not going. The other party seemed to be in a good mood, as if she were laughing. You owe me a favor, Huaisher. Huaisher rolled his eyes. She was referring to the reminder Huaisher had given him when he had taken AI Qing with him. You can't possibly treat that as a favor, right? You were defeated by me, okay? Little sister Hupa, don't be mistaken. That's fine. Hupa shrugged. The mystic bird said that you also owe him a favor. Huaisher was once again rendered speechless. He could deny the first, but he couldn't deny the second. After all, he hadn't been able to control himself after being drugged by the origin reversal medicine, which had allowed him to ascend to the creation wood tier. He had gone in and out of the eastern summer country like he was in a hotel, jumping around repeatedly. The Azure Emperor had even lent him Mount Tai for free. If it had been anyone else, they would have died a long time ago. Did he think that the white wolf hook and painting scroll were a joke? After a long silence, Huaisher couldn't help but sigh. I say, the Eastern Summer country has a lot of businesses, so there's no need to keep an eye on a sheep like me, right? Who said that I'm only keeping an eye on you? Hoopa asked back. Besides, although I really don't want to call you, I have to admit that you have advantages that others don't have. Good looks. Huaisher sneered. Miss, I sell my skills, not my body. Huaisher, if I wanted to find a male prostitute, there are plenty of them in the streets and alleys of the capital. Why would I find you to be unhappy? Hoopa sighed. Of course it's because you're cheap. Huaisher was stunned. How cheap? 70 million. The number Hoopa reported gave him a fright. Ha! Before Huaisher could squeeze out a sneer, he heard the unit Hoopa added, US dollars. You call this cheap? Huaisher's knees suddenly went soft. He couldn't believe it. Do you Chinese all use money printing machines? What a joke. How can money printing machines make as much money as being Chinese? Hoopa snorted in disdain. How much do you think the Rigian family's name and position as the head of the family is worth? How much is the Rigian family's family supervisor worth? The Anfang family's guardian? The Guanshan Group's shares? Okay, stop talking. I know I'm a country bumpkin. Huaisher's face twitched. Although she gave a lot of money, Huaisher still didn't waver. Miss Hoopa, even a country bumpkin has a backbone. Don't use money to humiliate me. Let's just leave it like this. And before he could finish the word "see," he heard a voice from the other side. Yuji treasure. Huaisher frowned. What's Yuji? Do you guys build a treasure house just for matcha? You know what I'm talking about, Huaisher. Don't play dumb. Hoopa said coldly. I'm talking about the capital city's equal court, the treasure house of Ingzhou's lineage, Yuji treasure. Didn't you want to say goodbye? Let's just leave it like this. Wait. Huaisher raised his voice. As a matcha lover, I want to hear a few more sentences. Tell me in detail. This is what I like to hear. On the other end of the phone, Rigian Hoopa took a deep breath and resisted the urge to hack this guy to death through the phone. The capital city's equal court is one of the most important bases of Ingzhou's lineage. The Yuji treasure is where the origin codex of many stigmata miracles are stored. Among them, the most precious are the remains of the 4 great demons. They're comparable to the crystals of the Philosopher's Stone. They're shared by all Chinese. In fact, each family gets a few different portions. Rigian Hoopa directly stated the price. If I can become the head, then the Rigian family's portion can be given to you. Huaisher swallowed his saliva and asked, Please enlighten me. What are the 4 great demons? Shutendaji, one of the pinnacle of Ingzhou's evil spirits. Atsuhimaru, formed by the degeneration of divinity. Tamamo, the demon fox with the highest degree of distortion. Finally, the 3rd generation Dai Tengu with the highest achievement in cultivation. You can choose from them. Even if the Rigian family doesn't have it, I'll exchange it for you. Seeing that Hoopa had spoken up to this point, he changed the topic. However, this is something I'm giving you, so your job won't be as easy as before. Similarly, I can't give you an advance payment. Only by becoming the head will you have the right to enter. Therefore, you'll only be rewarded if you succeed. Let's get the ugly words out of the way first. You have to consider it carefully. Aya, look at what you're saying. Huaisher's voice suddenly became gentle. Hoopa, you're really too much. We're so close, and you're talking about rewards. My good sister is in trouble. How can I just stand by and watch her die? Enough. The girl on the other end of the phone took a deep breath. Please don't say things that make my stomach uncomfortable. What a coincidence. I also have stomach problems. Huaisher sighed sympathetically. The doctor said that it'll be fine if you live off a woman, but I'm afraid you don't have that ability. Why? Sure. Cracking sounds came from the other end of the phone. It was as if the phone was about to be crushed. All right, there's no need to say anymore. I'll be there next week. Huaisher rubbed his hands excitedly. Us brother and sister are of the same mind. Our sharpness can cut through metal. Come on, fight. Victory belongs to you. Hoopa dear. Heart to heart, bang. The phone was finally completely crushed. Chapter 613. After hanging up, Huaisher fell into silence and didn't say anything else. He sat on the chair and began to think. After the head of the Rigian family was dethroned, the key position that was left vacant. The foreseeable competition between the Rygian family's orthodox and side branches, as well as the endless internal strife between the Wu family and the Gong family, as well as the infiltration of Dongxia's genealogy, the showdown between the chef and demon, the arrangement of the ivory tower, and the reward promised by Hu Po in the end. The remains of the four great demons in the Yuji treasure. They were known as treasures on the same level as the Philosopher's Stone. Their existence until now was not only because of their power, but also because of their position in history, which laid the foundation for Yingzhou's genealogy. It was like an antique that was displayed in a museum. They were all testimonies left behind in history, proof of the genealogy's past. As evil beings, the degree of distortion on them was shocking, but the correction value built on this foundation was not small either. As origin books, they had spread countless disasters, but at the same time gave birth to countless miracles. If they were used as materials for alchemy, they would be able to create rare treasures. If they were used as food, Huaisha lowered his head and stared at the blood-red imperial god blade on his knees. Amidst the endless resentment, there was an unquenchable sense of hunger and thirst. It was the ferocious nature of the crow hidden under their pious praise. During their evolution, not only did they not feel satisfied, they became even more desperate, craving for more food, more disasters, and more miracles. If that's the case, it's not a bad trip. Huaisha let out a long breath, looked at Tangi, who had unknowingly appeared beside him, and asked, "Do you have any suggestions?" Tangi thought for a bit. "Eat and drink well, bring some souvenirs, and don't pick the wildflowers by the roadside." Huaisha rolled his eyes. "Be serious. Anything else? Also, come to the basement tonight. I have something to tell you. I think it's time to teach you Great Si Ming's transformation technique." Tangi's smile gradually brightened. "Let me say this in advance. This ritual is very dangerous. How to use it and how to seize the opportunity will depend on you. Don't go overboard." From that smile, Huaisha sensed the familiar premonition of death. He sighed in understanding. "All right, it's time to persecute me again, isn't it?" In fact, this journey probably wouldn't be smooth sailing at all. From the very beginning, it made people feel that their lives were full of misfortune. In the afternoon of the next day, Huaisha received a call asking him to go to the school office as soon as possible because there was something important to inform him. "I'm sorry, Secretary Huai. Your passport was returned." The commissioner coughed a few times. "Yingzhou refused to issue your passport and issued a warning and complaint to the ivory tower." Huaisha was dumbfounded. "What the hell? We don't know about this either." The commissioner said to Huaisha with an indescribable expression, "For some reason, Looming Hall listed you as a dangerous person and issued a warrant for you. Also, they claimed that you still have several crimes in Yingzhou that are under prosecution, including impersonating a national civil servant and espionage. Do you have any clues?" "How would I know?" Huaisha widened his eyes and retorted in a trembling voice. "This is slander, complete slander. It's Looming Hall's despicable and shameless framing. Poor innocent people like me, the pillar of the Astronomy Association, the purple gold beam of the ivory tower, a young and promising upright man, have suffered such unfair treatment. The sun is shining, the sun is shining. I've made contributions to the present world. I've shed blood in hell. I want to appeal to the Astronomy Association. I want to appeal." He said that he wanted to appeal. In fact, Huaisha did appeal. The efficiency of the Astronomy Association was as outstanding as ever. 10 minutes later, a call came from the Countermeasure Secretariat of the Yingzhou Governance Bureau. A voice full of respect and humility expressed his understanding of Huaisha with a tone full of guilt, anger, and indignation. He complained about the despicable act of Looming Hall, and then inadvertently mentioned Huaisha's ranking on the internal blacklist of the Xinhua 7 Stars group. In the end, the other party said that they already knew about this matter and would soon organize a meeting to discuss and solve it. They were already doing it and were on the way. So, please rest assured and teach in the ivory tower. The Yingzhou Governance Bureau branch will definitely give you an explanation. Although the wording was very polite and general, if it was translated concisely, it would become very straightforward. Stinky brother, who are you trying to fool? Think about what you've done in the past. It's only been a little more than a year since the Asian rookie competition. The looming hall is still looking at you from the old crooked tree. The last time you, a member of the Astronomy Association, got involved in the Battle of Yamatai City. Do you know how many times our local gang wiped your ass for you? Why are you still jumping into the pit now? Just stay in the ivory tower obediently. In all fairness, as a brother unit, the Ingzhou Governance Bureau was already very kind. Otherwise, the looming hall's bounty and the Seven Stars Group's bounty wouldn't stop at the level of shouting. But they really didn't want to help. These days, it was already very difficult for the Governance Bureau to remain neutral in the struggle between the Wu family and the Gong family. Especially recently, the situation had begun to become turbulent again. All kinds of messy things had already caused the members of the countermeasure headquarters to lose a lot of hair. The ousting of the Rigian family was just a fuse. No one knew what kind of storm would come next. At this juncture, when they heard that the infamous Jinx in the Asian Governance Bureau was going to jump into the gunpowder warehouse at their doorstep and give everyone a job, the head of the customs at the border was scared. Brother, can't we just stop for a moment? Isn't the rice in the ivory tower delicious? Why did you come to Ingzhou to eat this cold lunch? In short, if he didn't complain, he wouldn't have known. But once he complained, he was shocked. Huaishir was shocked to find that his reputation had reached the edge of a dangerous cliff. He was dumbfounded. He felt that something was F***ing wrong. What the hell are you doing? I'm already prepared here, but you're banning me from entering the country? Do you bastards know how much determination I made and how much mental struggle I had to do? Besides, do you think you can stop me like this? In fact, they could really stop him. As long as the Ingzhou Governance Bureau was determined not to let Huaishir get involved in this matter, there were 100,000 soft nails that could knock him back. Even if Huaishir took the risk to sneak into Ingzhou, once he was exposed, there would be hundreds of commissioners accompanying him to a hot spring villa deep in the mountains to recuperate until this matter was over. It was difficult. Just as Huaishir was about to go bald, Russell, who had appeared out of nowhere, finally had enough of the commotion and slowly opened his mouth. He said slowly, "Speaking of which, I do have an idea." However, when Huaishir's hope was rekindled, he saw that old face begin to sigh with regret. But you can't go because it's your ex-girlfriend's birthday, right? Then forget it. After all, I'm not a demon. Feelings are a lifelong thing. They're definitely more important than work. Can I force you? What ex-girlfriend? A good horse doesn't go back to pasture. A breakup is a breakup. A broken mirror can't be reunited. Huaishir replied without hesitation. I only have work in my heart now. Work makes me happy. Sigh. I'm so pleased that you can think like this. Russell sighed again. But the list of members of the exchange team has already been decided. I can't arrange it. Old bastard, don't go too far. Huaishir's expression twitched. He squeezed out a smile. It's okay. I'm willing to contribute to the ivory tower. I'll take annual leave to do voluntary work. I don't want money. I definitely won't cause trouble for the exchange team. Russell pondered for a moment and couldn't help but sigh again. He glanced at Huaishir and shook his head. But this idea is a little difficult. I'm afraid you won't be able to accept it. There's only a challenge when there's difficulty. Huaishir patted his chest loudly and promised in a booming voice, as the guardian of the present realm, what kind of difficulties have I not seen before? I'll go through mountains of knives and seas of fire. All right, since you insist on going, as your teacher, I can't stop you. Russell sighed. He had a good time acting as a helpless teacher who couldn't persuade his stubborn disciple. It was only when Huaishir's teeth were about to shatter that he put his hands behind his back and walked away. Come with me. I have something for you. Not long after, the safe in Russell's office was opened. A heavy metal box was pulled out and placed on the table. After blowing off the non-existent dust, Russell carefully wiped his hands and opened the combination lock on top. This is the gift I prepared for you on the day you became my student. Originally, I wanted to give it to you when you finished your apprenticeship, but I think it's time for you to need it now. Following the old man's actions, The treasure that had been sleeping in front of Huai-Shi finally revealed its true appearance. In a long silence, Huai-Shi stood rooted to the ground. He raised his head stiffly and widened his eyes. What is this? Under the reflection of the yellow sunlight outside the window, the pure white inside the metal box glowed faintly. It was dreamy and illusory, as if it was calling out to its future owner. The meticulous tailoring from the designer highlighted the extraordinary taste and design, and the lace embellished on the collar and chest made it look even more elegant and sweet. Look at the snow-white color, look at the meticulous workmanship, and look at the elegant aura that greeted the face. Which sensible student would refuse such a gift? Which girl wouldn't be moved to tears when receiving it, understanding the teacher's encouragement and expectations for her? Just like that, with the strong expectations of the elders, a dress was delivered to Huai-Shi. Try it on. Is the size suitable? Russell smiled. Chapter 6:14. Sis, I'm going out. On Friday evening, Yuan Zhao bent down to pick up his backpack and suitcase. He turned around to say goodbye to his cousin, who was sending him to the door. Yuan looked at his fully armed appearance and asked again, "Did you bring everything?" "Yes, I brought everything. Don't worry." Yuan Zhao grinned and gave her a thumbs up. It was as if he was going on a study trip, full of sunshine. He didn't look very reliable. Yuan sighed. "Where's the key that second uncle gave you?" "It's also in my pocket." Yuan Zhao patted his pocket. "I'm just going out. Maybe I won't have anything to do there." "Sis, don't worry." Yuan didn't say anything. She wanted to tell him to pay attention to his safety, but such words were meaningless to the people of the Social Security Bureau. How could she not know what kind of powder kegging Zhou was now? Plus, her cousin was so unreliable. If he went there, he might jump into a fire or a mountain of knives. But as the eldest son of the Yuan family, how could he escape such a fate? After thinking for a long time, she only said, "I hope he can come back safely. Don't worry, there's Huai-Shi." Yuan Zhao waved his hand. "If there's anything, let him take care of it. I'm too lazy to stick my head out." Yuan's expression suddenly became complicated. "Teacher might not be able to go." After a moment of silence, the girl sighed. It said that a few days ago he wanted to sneak into the earth and was caught on the spot by the self-defense forces, but he was extradited by the Astronomy Society. He should still be in London now, right? Although he knew that his cousin was worried, Yuan Zhao couldn't help but laugh out loud. He became more and more excited. "Ha ha ha ha. If you visit him in prison, remember to make fun of him for me." Yuan Zhao raised his eyebrows and whistled. "Let him stay in London. This time, the real protagonist will appear." The sense of mission that hit him in the face. This familiar sense of inheritance. That's right, the foreshadowing was over. Next, it was time for the real hero, the future star of Doomsday, Yuan Zhao, to appear. After leaving the door, Yuan Zhao couldn't help but dance with joy. With every step he took, he seemed to smell the fragrance of freedom, the sense of relief, the sense of anticipation, and the refreshing breeze that blew in his face. "Do you hear that, Yuan Zhao? That's cousin calling out to you." Filled with hope, the young Yuan Zhao ran on the path towards the future. "Ingzhou, figurines, models, and girls, I'm coming." Although he had a mission from the Social Security Bureau, Yuan Zhao was still a student of the Ivory Tower in name. If he wanted to enter Ingzhou, he couldn't use the name of Dongsha genealogy. As a member of the academic exchange team, although Yuan Zhao didn't know anything about academics, it didn't stop him from looking cute and sweet. From his point of view, he could be considered to have grown up, right? Although he was still a Chinibyu, at least he was much more obedient under Yuan's iron fists and learned how to communicate politely with ordinary people. It didn't take long for him to become familiar with the dozens of professors and students in the exchange team. Even the usually harsh vice headmaster Isaac didn't make things difficult for him because of his identity and other motives. Just like that, he smoothly integrated into the group. It was also because of this that he noticed a figure faintly drifting away from the group. Just in the corner of the waiting hall, the slender figure in front of the window. Under the dim light of the setting sun, the white skirt fell from the edge of the chair and covered her ankles, revealing the straps of her shoes and her white ankles. Her long hair with a faint green color fell from her shoulders, and a corner of the silk scarf wrapped around her slender neck naughtily poked out. She seemed to be focused on reading, but her eyes didn't fall on the book. In a reflection of the window, the delicate and quiet face occasionally raised and looked out the window. Her eyes were blurry, as if sinking into the gradually rising night. It was so familiar. It was like déjà vu. An inexplicable impact suddenly fell on Yuan Zhao's heart, causing it to stop beating for a second. He was stunned on the spot and lost his mind. After a long time, he woke up and felt a burning sensation on his face. It was red and hot. He couldn't help but get up and walk over. He wanted to talk, but he didn't know what to say. After hesitating for a long time, he finally mustered up the courage to speak. However, when he opened his mouth, he was so nervous that his voice went out of tune. "Hello, hello." The girl's shoulders trembled, and she turned around to look at him in shock. Her eyes were like those of a frightened deer, confused and at a loss. "Hello, my name is Yuan Zhao." Yuan Zhao tried hard to squeeze out a friendly smile and wanted to shake hands. "Are you also a member of the exchange group?" The girl was stunned for a long time and didn't say anything. Just as Yuan Zhao was feeling awkward, he saw her raise a finger and point at her throat. She waved her hand and opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Yuan Zhao finally understood. She doesn't know how to speak. It seemed that she wasn't used to being so close to others. The girl fumbled through her bag and presented a business card with both hands. The business card faintly carried the fragrance of a young girl. The content was not complicated. Other than the Ivory Tower's emblem and phone number, there were only 2 lines of concise handwriting. "Motoko. Kaisha Motoko. Motoko? What cute name." Yuan Zhao subconsciously said what was in his heart. The girl's eyes immediately avoided his gaze. His heart skipped a beat, and he couldn't help but blush. "Sorry, subconsciously, I didn't do it on purpose. I just came over to get to know you. You can continue reading. I won't disturb you." Until he returned to his seat in a daze, there was a dazed smile on his face. He was completely out of his wits. He was still holding the business card in his hand. He couldn't believe that he succeeded in striking up a conversation so easily and even got her phone number. He waited until he got on the bus and was still intoxicated by this sudden joy and surprise. What was rare was that Yuan Zhao didn't have the time to laugh at Huai Shi when he talked about that bastard with others. His eyes kept involuntarily looking behind him. Even the seniors opposite him noticed it and couldn't help but cover their mouths and snicker. However, he noticed that Motoko didn't seem to be able to blend in with the group. Since she couldn't speak, she couldn't participate in everyone's conversation. She could only sit alone at the back and read and stare blankly. Yuan Zhao wanted to talk to her, but he didn't know what to say. He could only look at her from afar. However, Vice Principal Isaac seemed to have a lot of opinions about her. When they talked in private, his expression seemed to be angry and cold, as if he was ordering something. Poor Motoko, a weak girl, couldn't speak. She could only nod awkwardly and try to smile. It was too much. After a few times, even the other professors and students felt that the vice principal was too strict this time. They used work as an excuse to pull him away. "Motoko. Ahem, Miss Motoko, don't be afraid." Yuan Zhao finally gathered his courage and sat over. He said solemnly, "If Mr. Isaac is angry again, I will help you." The girl looked at him in shock. She couldn't believe it and widened her eyes. She seemed a little embarrassed. After a long time, she nodded gently. She shyly lowered her eyes. Yuan Zhao was stunned for a long time. His face was flushed, and he felt that his heart was about to melt. After the foreshadowing just now, he finally had a chance to talk to the little sister. Motoko didn't seem to care that he was stuttering and didn't know how to chat. She always listened patiently and nodded her head in agreement from time to time, but she would occasionally look in the vice principal's direction. Obviously, she was still a little scared and had a shadow in her heart. This made Yuan Zhao even angrier. This Isaac was really too much. What kind of teacher was he to bully a girl? He must be a beast with a human face and has some bad thoughts about Miss Motoko. He was even more determined to protect the little sister. In the distance, Vice Principal Isaac also seemed to look over. He couldn't help but want to get up several times, but he was stopped by his colleagues. They tried their best to persuade him, but they couldn't affect Yuan Zhao and Motoko's alone time. If he was anxious, Yuan Zhao saw this and sneered in his heart. He actually changed his position and blocked the vice principal's prying eyes with his body. He smiled at the stunned Motoko. Motoko was stunned for a moment, but she also showed him a grateful smile. She thought emotionally, "Fuck, this stinky brother is so annoying. What the hell is Yuan Zhao doing? Vice Principal, please come and save me." But this time, no matter how much Miss Motoko prayed in her heart, Mr. Isaac couldn't save her from the abyss of suffering. Yuan Zhao kept talking along the way. By the time they reached Yingzhou, Miss Motoko already knew that he was a young and promising man from Dongsha. He had a house, a car, and a horse at home. He was the future backbone of the Social Security Bureau and a famous Gamecock streamer. He also had two very powerful sisters. His father was very strict, and his mother was very gentle. His brothers and sisters were very good. Also, she had to be very careful and vigilant of a beast in human clothing called Huaishur. It was said that he liked to play with ignorant girls like her. Once she fell into the hands of that pervert, she would be done this and that. In the end, she would be covered with the word official and would never be able to escape from that perverted demon's control and exploitation. But she didn't have to be afraid because this stinky brother in front of her would definitely protect her. Damn it, I've had enough. Beelzebub, who was in the backpack, had been laughing wildly since this morning. He hadn't stopped for 12 hours. Miss Motoko felt like she was going crazy. But this stinky brother in front of her wasn't done yet. If she wasn't worried that her identity would be exposed, Miss Motoko would have pulled him into the toilet, lifted her skirt, and let him know what it meant to be bigger than her. Fortunately, the train finally arrived at the station just before Susie could no longer hold back and was about to vomit. Yingzhou, the capital, welcome. Chapter 615. There's no way I can live like this. Huaishur sighed. He lowered his head and looked at the completely unfamiliar girl in the mirror in the washroom. When he realized that this was him, he felt a headache coming on. Tongi, that bad girl, couldn't she make herself uglier? Why did she have to make herself look so good? It was a mistake to ask her to dress up for him from the beginning. Also, Hupo's stupid sister must pay more. Otherwise, his great sacrifice would have been in vain. After cursing Russell, that old bastard who only wanted to see him make a fool of himself, in his mind, Huaishur opened his small bag and began to touch up his makeup while Beelzebub was mocking him. Did he not take good care of himself recently? He felt like he had wrinkles on his forehead. After more than 10 minutes, he finally realized what was wrong. His thinking was too slippery. He felt that if this continued, he would become strange. He had to change his image. After pondering for a while, Huaishur nimbly braided two village girls' hair. Then he took out a pair of old-fashioned glasses from his backpack and put them on his nose bridge. He looked up. For some reason, he felt even worse. After a long time, he could only change back to his original appearance. He sighed and walked out of the washroom. Only when he heard the foreign language around him and saw the small crow's books for sale in the station's booth did he realize that he had come to Yingzhou. The interior of the station was quite modern. Ascenders gathered and dispersed here. Soon, they would merge into the flow of people from the upper level of Jingdu Station from various paths and then go in all directions. After all, it was one of the few large transportation hubs between the present realm and the border. It did not seem deserted or crowded. However, as he walked, Huaishur instinctively sensed a strange gaze coming from behind him, as well as a discordant voice following him slowly among the many footsteps. Someone was following him. He was being watched as soon as he got off the train. His footsteps paused. Suddenly, he took a detour. He did not go to the place where the ivory tower connected. Instead, he casually strolled around the shops in the station. He took the stalker in the crowd, who thought that he had hidden well, for a walk. With the perception and ability of the mirror of nothingness, Huaishur was quite sensitive to all the emotions that fell on him, especially those that pretended to inadvertently cast glances at him from behind. If he didn't know how to suppress his own emotions, Even the most careful gazes would trigger a change in Huaishi's origin substance. In the crowd, the girl in the white dress suddenly stopped in her tracks. The crowd at the crossroad gathered briefly, and when they separated again, the figure had already disappeared without a trace. The tracker, who was dressed like a backpacker, was stunned for a moment. He took off his sunglasses and looked over, but he couldn't find any trace of her. He frowned. He didn't rush forward to investigate. Instead, he took 2 steps back and turned to leave. In a slightly dark corner, Huaishi's inconspicuous figure appeared. This was the innate concealment advantage of being in the dark. After 2 advanced enhancements, the Bone Burial Sanctum could form an effect similar to invisibility even in a slightly dimly lit place. Coupled with the concealment skill, countering such tracking was not a problem at all. But what Huaishi was more curious about was who was following him. Was he exposed as soon as he got off the train? That's not right. If it was someone from the Yingzhou governing authority, they would have taken a photo and asked him to cooperate with the investigation. There was no need for sneaky tracking. He had the Book of Destiny. No matter who took his position, they could only conclude that he was now receiving an investigation and education in London. After the Yingzhou countermeasure room sent him back, they probably wouldn't waste too much manpower on this problem. Then, who would have evil thoughts about the weak and pitiful Miss Huaiji? He followed, but he found that the backpacker, after a few turns, actually turned into the men's toilet. Had he been discovered? He was stunned for a moment. On the other side, the backpacker who turned into the toilet vigilantly identified that no one was following him through the mirror on the sink. He lifted the sunglasses on his face, washed his hands casually, stood in front of the urinal, and began to whistle. Behind him, the old cleaner who cleaned the toilet hummed a song and lowered his head to mop the floor. The backpacker raised his head and looked straight at the decorative painting on the tiles as he said casually, "Director, my surveillance target may have discovered me. Huaiji Suzi." The old cleaner paused for a moment and frowned. Is there really a problem? The introduction on the exchange team's list. How can a female student who is a translator have this ability? There must be a problem. The backpacker asked, has the intelligence department checked her background? It said that she's the daughter of a rich family in the Guanxi area. Weak. A bunch of useless people who sit in the office every day and don't know how to work without a search engine. The old cleaner complained unhappily and said, I will report it and increase her vigilance. Your mission continues. Change the surveillance target. Remember, the ivory tower needs to be a highly vigilant target. Don't make any mistakes and don't be rash. The implication was that if they couldn't handle it, they should be more cautious. Everyone was here to get paid, so they shouldn't make any trouble to cover the national flag. After all, they weren't in charge after leaving the station. The rest would be left to the elites of the first batch. Okay. Experiencing the concern from his superior, the backpacker couldn't help but laugh. Then he frowned. Also, who came up with this stupid idea of meeting in the toilet? Me. The director took off his cap and scratched his white hair. He stood in front of the urinal and couldn't help but sigh. When people get old, it's easy to urinate and can't hold it in. Sometimes, I can't even pee after standing for a long time. It's better for my bladder to be near the toilet. By the way, Yamada, why can't you pee? There's someone next to me. I'm nervous. The backpacker Yamada couldn't help but sigh. I told you not to drink with Hama and the others. Director, you're already so old. Why don't you admit defeat? I'm still young. The director snorted and lowered his head, looking disdainfully at his subordinate's outrageous look. Look, Yamada. Compared to your soft water gun, my torrent is so strong. Yamada wanted to roll his eyes. I'm not looking. It hurts my eyes too much. Although he said that, the sound of water splashing came from beside him. It stunned him for a long time. He couldn't believe it. Wait, isn't this too unreasonable? In the end, he couldn't help but look to the side. He saw the figure standing between the two of them. He froze on the spot. He didn't know when she had appeared. A pure and adorable girl with a hint of sweetness was standing shoulder to shoulder with them. She lifted her white dress, whistled, and peed in satisfaction. She swayed proudly. The old cleaner and the backpacker froze on the spot. They opened their mouths in a daze, but they couldn't say anything. They couldn't even make a sound. When the sound of water gradually disappeared, she put down her white dress again, hiding the indescribably terrifying thing in the darkness of the taboo again. Then, she raised her hands and put them on their shoulders rather intimately. She comforted them earnestly. Everyone has their strengths and weaknesses. There's nothing to feel inferior about. It's fine as long as you have enough, right? No one responded. The two of them, who were about to turn into wax under the fierce poison, still maintained their dumbfounded posture. Their pupils trembled, and they could not hide their panic. Then, the girl who suddenly appeared asked in a man's voice, looming Hall. Yamada's pupils shook twice in fear. It was as if he was denying it. She thought for a moment and asked again, see? Her pupils continued to shake. It was expected. After all, they were just two noobs who had sublimated. One was a second order, and the other was a first order. They didn't seem to be from a violent organization within the Ingzhou genealogy. Could be MPD? This time, the two secret police from the Kyoto Metropolitan Police Department finally began to blink crazily. Okay, then, thank you for your cooperation. Miss Huaiqi nodded and turned to the sink. After washing her hands, she turned around and said, although I don't know why you're following me, the price for following a beautiful girl like me is to have a good sleep for 2 months. As she said that, she looked back and smiled. Sweet dreams. As soon as she finished speaking, the two of them fell to the ground and fainted from the high fever. Miss Huaiqi picked up her backpack again and walked out of the door. She narrowed her eyes slightly in the crowd. Finally, she understood the tension of the situation. Even the Kyoto Metropolitan Police Department began to monitor the situation at the border station. It seemed that Ingzhou was really not peaceful recently. Miss Huaiqi, a sudden voice of surprise sounded. He had searched for her thousands of times in the crowd. When Yuan Zhao suddenly turned around, he was pleasantly surprised to see the woman he had been thinking about in his heart, walking out of the men's washroom. The smile of joy froze on his face. Miss Huaiqi, are you stupid, stinky brother? Huaisher smiled, waved goodbye to him, turned around, and walked away. Yuan Zhao was left alone in a daze. He looked back at her departing figure and the men's washroom in front of him. He was stunned. What was going on? Why, no, it must be because the women's washroom was full. That's right, so that's why. That must be it. He didn't expect Miss Huaiqi to be so casual and flexible. She was really amazing. Just like that, with hope in his heart, Yuan Zhao walked into the washroom. He lowered his head and saw the two men on the ground. His smile gradually disappeared. A burly man with dark skin and a wretched old man were lying on the ground. Their faces were flushed and their clothes were disheveled. He thought of Miss Huaiqi's satisfied smile again. He didn't know why, but tears fell down uncontrollably. On this day, the 15-year-old Yuan Zhao finally witnessed the legendary world of darkness that only adults knew about. At that moment, a cracking sound came from the boy's chest. Yuan Zhao's love heart was broken. Chapter 616. It didn't matter what the world was like anymore. Ingzhou or whatever, it didn't matter. Missions from the Social Security Bureau, it didn't matter. They were all meaningless things. When Yuan Zhao walked out of the bathroom in a daze, he seemed to have changed into a different person. He hunched his back and followed the team from the ivory tower dejectedly. He was like a walking corpse. When the seniors looked over, their eyes became sympathetic. This young man probably failed in his confession. He had to suffer more beatings from society in order to grow. Come on, Yuan Zhao, don't lose to yourself. But in Yuan Zhao's eyes, those words of encouragement didn't matter anymore. The outside world was too scary. Sister Yuan, I want to go home. At this moment, he only wanted to return to his warm room, take a bath, drink a cup of hot tea, curl up into a ball in the heavy cup, and then cover his head and cry until he had no strength left, and then fall into a deep sleep. It would be best if he didn't dream and never woke up again. The three-dimensional world was too dirty. He wanted to go back to his two-dimensional world. Just as he rubbed his red eyes and couldn't help but feel sad, he heard a voice in front of him. Is it snowing? It's only November, so early. Then I can take the time to go skiing? I want to soak in the hot springs. I heard that there are wild monkeys on the mountain. Almond, can you come with me? Okay, okay. I'll accompany you no matter what you do. Looking at the affectionate couple, Yuan Zhao looked away numbly and snorted in disdain. Stupid, three-dimensional world. Do you think you can hurt me like this? My heart is already, he wanted to say that his heart was already dead. But when he raised his head and looked into the distance, he saw the snow powder slowly falling from the sky of the square, the neon lights, and a slender figure at the end of the crowd. She stood in the pure, white, falling snow. She seemed to have blended into this pure world. It was hard to tell them apart. Only her long hair fluttered in the wind. Her black eyes were illuminated by the light in the distance. She raised her hand in surprise to catch the snowflakes falling from the sky with a childlike and pure smile. She was like a fairy in the snow. She didn't belong to this world. Miss Huaiji, Yuan Zhao froze in place. With a plop, it was as if a needle had been injected into his chest. His originally shattered heart was once again mended, fiercely beating for a moment, causing his dying soul to once again shine with hope. He was ready. Yes, Yuan Zhao, it's still too early to give up. He hadn't asked anything and didn't know anything. He had only seen some discordant things, which might not be the truth. Besides, even if, just as he was feeling conflicted and wanted to go up, he realized that the figure had already disappeared in the crowd. Gone. Yuan Zhao widened her eyes and looked at the group beside her. To her surprise, she discovered that she was not in the exchange team. Where did she go? Miss Huaiji's schedule is different from ours. The vice principal stopped beside him for a moment, then glanced at him from the corner of his eyes. Also, Mr. Yuan, as a member of the Ivory Tower, you may not have much of a sense of identity with the school, but please try not to cause trouble in your next solo operation. Especially, don't bear the name of the Ivory Tower, he warned sternly. Regarding the two secret police in the washroom, the MPD has already issued a serious warning to us. I hope this kind of thing won't happen again. Washroom, secret police? Yuan Zhao finally understood. So it's like this, I understand. Nothing filthy as he imagined had happened. Miss Suko only chose to fight back after being harassed by the two secret police. That's great. That's really great. In the silence, Isaac saw the expression of the young man in front of him constantly changing. At first, he was stunned. Then he couldn't help but reveal a relieved smile. In the end, he was so moved that he actually cried. No, little brother, what's wrong with you? He took a step back in shock, his eyes filled with disdain. Another crazy. JPG, he was completely unaware of how this scene looked to others. Hey, did you see that? The vice principal first bullied Miss Huaiji, and now he actually made the most tender little brother in the group cry. This is too outrageous, too much of a bully. Isaac's reputation continued to be damaged. In the end, when Yuan Zhao finally calmed down a little, Isaac raised his eyes and looked at the car that had been waiting for a long time next to the square. The person who came to pick you up has arrived. Mr. Yuan Zhao, you should go. He said, please remember, no matter what you do, you must come back when the academic exchange officially begins in half a month. Yuan Zhao nodded, wiped his tears, and turned to leave. Isaac's lips opened and closed for a moment, but he was silent for a moment. In the end, he only said coldly, I really hope that the next time we meet again is not at your funeral or in the prison cell of Looming Hall. He retracted his gaze and stopped looking. The car had already left with Yuan Zhao. It went straight in the direction of Ingzhou Bridge, the great entrance to the second dimension. What Nara? Miss Huaiji had disappeared. No mood. Next time. 5 minutes ago, Miss Suko, the fairy in the snow, did not notice a certain young man who had reignited his hope not far away. She looked up at the falling snow in the sky and thought in her heart, damn it, I'm so cold. I'm going to buy a down jacket. He turned and walked into the mall. When he came out half an hour later, he had already changed his clothes. He wore a down jacket, jeans, a knitted hat, and a pair of huge sunglasses. He didn't look like the pure, innocent, and pitiful girl from before. He was fed up with the scene where a group of people would snort when he picked his nostrils. Thinking of those disgusting peeping eyes, Huaisher suddenly trembled with anger. His hands and feet were cold. Could this world be better? He finally realized that it was not easy for women. Now, he could finally practice martial arts openly. From this point, it seemed that it could be considered an advantage. He was not as licentious as a certain young man who was like a wild dog out of control. Huaisher, who was paid to do things, at least had a sense of responsibility. He directly bought a JR Express to Nara. After eating something, he planned to go to Nara today first. Before meeting Hupa, he wanted to figure out the current situation in Nara. At least he didn't want to jump into the mud. If the situation was out of his expectations, Huaisher would turn around and leave without hesitation. Then he would think of a way to fish in troubled waters and get a ticket from the Equal Academy. After all, it was Huaisher who stole things. What did it have to do with Huaisher? Unknowingly, Huaisher's moral values were getting lower and lower, and his conscience was getting less and less. On the JR Express platform, Huaisher leaned back in his chair. Behind his sunglasses, he couldn't help but look into the distance at the other end of the booth. It was as if a bear was standing there. It was eye-catching. In fact, it wasn't just him. The people around him couldn't help but look over and whisper to each other. There was no other reason. It was because the back of that figure was too burly. More than 2 meters tall, a burly middle-aged white man covered in muscles. His abnormally pale skin was covered with layers of tattoos. Even his face was covered with a skull. Messy hair casually fell down his back. He wore sunglasses that were bigger than Huaisher's. He had a headset on his head and chewed gum in his mouth. His face was full of stubble, and there were layers of gold chains around his wrists and neck. He looked like a punk. Next to him was a suitcase that was almost as tall as him. It was emitting a fierce aura, which made people pay attention to it. Sensing the gazes of the people around him, the man wasn't angry. Instead, he leaned on his suitcase complacently, looking at those gazes. When he saw the figure in the distance, his eyes lit up. He opened his mouth and greeted her in shaky Latin. "Miss, do you want to sit with me? I think we'll have a good trip." After saying that, he arched his biceps. His oversized black t-shirt was squeezed so much that it almost burst open. "Miss, your mother's leg." Huaisher rolled his eyes. He didn't want to bother with him, so he raised his middle finger. The burly man laughed and retracted his gaze. He didn't continue to pester her. Instead, he continued to indulge in the rap song that came from his headset. His body slightly twisted as if there was no one around. However, the familiar smell on his body made Huaisher instantly know his identity. He was the same as him, Hell's cooking demon. They were both going to Nara. A cooking demon duel? Was there really going to be a cooking demon competition in the capital? The corners of Huaisher's eyes began to twitch wildly. He was starting to get bald. They didn't have to wait too long. The train arrived on time. Now that Huaisher was ostracized by the local gangs, he naturally couldn't use the local astronomical society's network to search for information. However, this was the time when the collection of 10,000 sins came in handy. As a super-large DD Beats man, this absolutely illegal software included all kinds of businesses that could not exist under the sun, including but not limited to murder, arson, kidnapping, extortion, perjury, border auction of relics, and even all kinds of illegal acts that humans could think of. Back then, the Chi family even bought their legs on it. Now that he thought about it, he really missed it. Of course, as a member of the Astronomical Society, Huaisher, who was determined to protect the present world, had such a software installed on his phone. It was also natural that he had a VIP Level 9 membership that he shared with Tongi. In fact, the Federal Bureau of Investigation had done a lot of fishing on it. He had posted countless posts like, "Good sister, I want to continue working hard. I urgently need border poison. I want to kill the rich woman I married. Can you help me?" He would also post a photo of himself to increase his persuasiveness, and then wait for the idiot to walk into the trap. The collection of 10,000 sins didn't care about this at all. Double-crossing was a part of the illegal world. If you didn't like it, don't play. Therefore, at least in the Dongxia section, Huaisher's photo had become a thorn in the side of many people. It was a pity that criminals these days learn too quickly. Otherwise, Huaisher's previous performance would have increased a lot. Just as the train started to move, the passenger sitting across from Huaisher finally got on. She was still talking on the phone. Zhenshi, be careful on the road. Okay, Mom. I'm just going to go through the process. I'm already on the train. Uncle Yinjing will pick me up when I arrive. I'll hang up first. After hanging up the phone, the girl, who was about the age of a high school student, smiled embarrassedly at Huaisher. Through the gap between the sunglasses, she saw a pair of eyes looking up. She was stunned for a moment, then immediately realized that she was being rude. She quickly looked away, her cheeks a little hot. Huaisher didn't care about her appearance. Anyway, this kind of vulgar girl couldn't compare to him in terms of beauty. His gaze swept across JK, then continued to look up. He raised his head slightly and looked at the roof of the train. He raised his eyebrows. There was someone up there. Chapter 617. Someone was on the roof of the car. From the faint vibration of the car, an abnormal echo could be felt on the roof. It was a faint vibration caused by tiptoeing. The technique was indeed flawless and admirable. It was even as light as a falling leaf. But this was where the biggest failure came from. How could a falling leaf crawl like a person? Moreover, it was on the roof of the accelerating Shinkansen. It was probably a train rider. This level of skill was probably not even at the level of the Orchard Gym experience class. After Huaisher glanced at it, he looked away with disinterest. Then, he felt the girl's body tense up. Intentionally or unintentionally, she looked over. She looked at Huaisher, thinking that she would not attract attention. Lousy snooping. Difficult to understand. But all this didn't seem to be the case to the girl opposite him. When Huaisher raised her head to look up and then looked away, her heart skipped a beat and she froze on the spot. It seems like a strange big sister rolled her eyes. What's going on? Was he being rude? What did I do wrong? She sat in her seat, her heart in a mess. She felt an inexplicable panic. Was it because she didn't take a shower? No, I just took a shower before I went out. Thinking of this, she quickly pulled up her collar and sniffed twice. She took a deep breath. There was only the smell of laundry detergent. It was the same on her hair, hands, and body. There were no strange stains or smells. Was it because the phone call disturbed her? That couldn't be right. She just sat down and hung up the phone. She even apologized. No one should care about such a small matter, right? Could it be? Suddenly, a bolt of lightning flashed across her mind. Was it because her clothes were too old-fashioned? Was this the legendary regional discrimination? Subconsciously, Makoto lowered her head and looked at her clothes. She bought a checkered coat online, gloves that she had worn for a long time, a long dress that she had casually bought from the shopping street in her hometown, thick stockings bought from a convenience store, and tasteless sneakers, as well as her rustic long hair that had no sense of design and was just casually combed twice. Looking at the opposite side, her navy blue down jacket perfectly accentuated her slender waist, and her jeans perfectly wrapped around her slender legs without any embellishments. She had the perfect figure of a model, a slender neck, and a pair of plain white canvas shoes that surpassed all the ugly ducklings. A pair of huge sunglasses covered half of her beautiful face, and under the knitted hat, her enviable long hair flowed down like a black stream. She intentionally dressed in a gender-neutral manner, which didn't reveal many of her female characteristics. Instead, she gave off a seductive vibe unique to tomboys, which gave off a fatal allure. This was already a terrifying level that could kill both men and women. Moreover, they were all brands that she couldn't recognize. They must be very expensive for the first time in her life. Zhenshi, who had grown up in the countryside, was now a 17-year-old female high school student and was now in the prime of her life, felt the superiority and disdain of the people of Kyoto. The people of the capital were too scary. She curled up in the chair, shivering. Inconceivably, she didn't feel angry at all when a strange woman rolled her eyes at her. She felt just like a swan proudly swam past an ugly duckling. She didn't feel angry or resentful at all. Instead, she was attracted by Zhenshi's unusual beauty. She wanted to get closer. She wanted to observe her closely and get closer to her big sister. Just the thought of such a beautiful woman sitting across from her maid Jeanne, she's face reddened. She mustered her courage and looked up from her cell phone screen again. Then, she saw her raise her hand and take off the sunglasses on her face. A pair of black eyes looked over and met Makoto's gaze. She seemed to be asking, "Why are you looking at me?" Sorry. Jeanne, she stiffened for a moment and shrunk her neck, not daring to look again. But she couldn't help but regret. I shouldn't have talked to her just now. Even if it was just a self-introduction, would she have told me her name? She could feel her heart beating madly in her chest. Dokidoki. She was beginning to panic. Unbelievable. Her fingers trembled as she opened up a web page and began searching to verify her suspicions. Soon, she was astonished to discover something. For the first time in her 17 years of life, the person she was attracted to was actually a woman? Was there something wrong with her mind? Normally speaking, shouldn't girls like boys? Or was it that she had abnormal cells that she hadn't even noticed before? Mommy, save me. In her panic, she suddenly got up and stood at attention. She wanted to go to the bathroom to escape from reality. But her tense body still hadn't gotten used to the train's acceleration, so she staggered and fell forward. She didn't have time to scream. She immediately fell into a stranger's arms and felt the softness of a downed feather. She was supported. When she finally lifted her head, she saw a face right in front of her, her eyes and a faint fragrance. Her mind was completely blank. She actually felt pain and regret in her heart as her heart beat madly. She's such a perfect beauty, but her body is so pitiful. Sorry. She hurriedly got up and felt her nose heat up. She hurriedly covered her face, only to discover that her nose was bleeding. I am going to the bathroom. It was as if she was running away. She rushed towards the end of the corridor without even looking back. Fleischer was left in a daze. He didn't know what was going on. Black person ? JPG. Her heart was beating madly. Jeanne, she breathed heavily. She raised her hand and splashed the cold water on her face, hoping that she could calm down a little. But every time she closed her eyes, that flawless face appeared in front of her. It was so cold, but it made her heart beat uncontrollably. Calm down, Junshi. You're the daughter of the Wu family. You can't be like a love-struck fool. But even so, how could she calm down? She closed her eyes in despair. After staying in the bathroom for half an hour, she finally calmed down a little. Or rather, she finally had the courage to go back. She braced herself and pushed the door open. She was stunned. She didn't know when it started, but the world became silent. Even the distant sound of the train tracks had disappeared. The sound of the air conditioner operating, the broadcast system, and even the voices outside. Everything had disappeared. She felt a little cold. She exhaled a white breath, and her fingers were cold. Is the air conditioner broken? When she walked in the aisle, she realized that the passengers around her had disappeared without a trace. She was nowhere to be seen. Is anyone here? She raised her voice and asked timidly. No one responded. There was only a cold and dead silence. When she finally returned to her seat, she found that she was still in the same place. That's right, she was still sitting on the chair. The other her was there, never leaving. But her appearance had changed beyond recognition. It was as if thousands of years had passed in an instant. The clothes that had weathered the vicissitudes of life had long since turned yellow and tattered. All that remained was a pale and broken skeleton. Now, in her line of sight, she saw the dead truth propping up her skull. Rotten black blood flowed out silently from her empty eye sockets. Like tears, she was rooted to the ground, unable to move. She wanted to scream subconsciously, but she couldn't make a sound. She almost suffocated in the cold and collapsed to the ground. She used all her strength to move her body backward. She wanted to run and escape. She ran faster and faster. She had never run like this in the track and field club. However, the chill was still chasing after him like maggots in his bones. It even appeared in front of her. When she pushed open the door of the isolation compartment, she saw the skeleton standing in front of her. With black tears, the skeleton stepped forward and looked down at her. With her voice, she asked hoarsely, "Where are you going?" Jeanne, she couldn't speak, couldn't move. In the eternal silence, there was a frightened whimper. Just outside the window, the world had changed. On the barren land, not even a blade of grass grew. In the sky, the blood moon hung high, illuminating the ferocious outline. It was a huge shadow that covered the sky and the earth. The ferocious spider danced in its web, looking down coldly and ferociously. It tightened the rope inch by inch, destroying the soul in the web. It was at that moment that Huaisher sighed and looked up. Sure enough, he couldn't ignore it. He stood up abruptly, took off the sunglasses on his face, and walked straight to the bathroom. At the door of the bathroom, he saw a burly man walking towards him. It was a tall and sturdy man covered in tattoos, who was as strong as a giant bear. Hell's chef demon. Oh, it seems that you're going to do it? He didn't care about the smoke lamp that kept ringing above his head. He smoked a thick cigar and looked at Huaisher with a faint smile. Next to him, the conductor was trying to persuade him to put out the cigarette in a panic. He carelessly pushed her to the side. Suddenly, he took a step back to show his courtesy. Then I don't need to get involved. The man said, Please, sir, let me see the ability of the cooking demon of Ingzhou. He was far more sensitive than others. No, it should be said that as a cooking demon, he had a perception that was thousands of times sharper than ordinary people, especially for the aura of his own kind. The moment he met Huaisher, he instinctively knew each other's identity. Huaisher didn't bother to correct the mistake in his words. He raised his hand and pressed on the door of the bathroom. There was a soft creak. The door opened. The force of the drummer's hand was activated in an instant, and the internal structure of the door lock was crushed into dust. The conductor, who had just got up, was stunned. Wait, what are you doing? Hey, don't get in the way. The burly, tattooed, cooking demon pressed one hand on his shoulder and held him down, not allowing him to interfere. Chapter 618. The bear-like, burly, cooking demon lowered his head and looked at the door lock that Huaisher had broken. His eyes were sparkling. Nice technique. What kind of shelling technique is this? It's rare for the shell to be broken so evenly. Do you have time to talk? Huaisher rolled his eyes and walked into the washroom. He saw the girl who had fainted on the ground. Her consciousness was no longer here. She had sunk into a man-made nightmare. He could foresee that if the origin substance continued to evaporate at this rate, she would soon die of brain death. The cracking sound on the roof seemed to be getting more and more impatient. It was filled with displeasure at the sudden intruder. An invisible lead appeared in front of Huaisher. It was like a thin spider's web. One end was connected to the girl in front of him, while the other end extended upwards into the meticulously created nightmare. Huaisher reached out and pinched the lead. Once you cut it off, the little girl will really die. The burly cooking demon watched the show and kindly reminded Huaisher. However, Huaisher did not respond at all. He touched his nose awkwardly and shook his head. So cold. Are all the women in Ingzhou like this? He looked at the train attendant who was caught. The train attendant was struggling. When he saw the unconscious girl, he wanted to scream and ask for help. Don't spoil the fun, friend. The cooking demon pinched his shoulder lightly with 2 fingers. With a slight force, the nerves of the train attendant were paralyzed, and he could no longer move. If there was another cut, it would be the humane way of handling ingredients. There would be no pain at all. However, such an inferior ingredient would not have any taste, right? He retracted his gaze and looked at the washroom. However, it was a pity that in the short moment he looked, everything had already ended. When Huaisher reached out and pinched the lead, the ending was already decided. At that moment, in the deepest nightmare, Zhen Shi, who was being embraced by death inch by inch, suddenly twitched. In the midst of her dizziness, she heard a sharp explosion. It was like the sound of the sky breaking. The dark sky was torn apart by some kind of violent power, revealing the boundless light of the dream realm and a pair of cold eyes looking down from the sky. A dark storm swept across, and a violent tide fell from the sky. Just like in the legends, after the sky was broken, the water of the 4 seas fell from the sky. It was a frenzied tide of darkness. However, when the tide dispersed, black metal wings spread out in the sky. Countless scarlet eyes looked down and let out sharp and frenzied cries. Full of hunger, it rushed towards the panicked giant spider. The crow tide that had awakened in the cage of dreams swept out and instantly engulfed the gigantic shadow that covered the sky and the earth. In this illogical nightmare, big and small, far and near, strong and weak were all illogical. All logic was based on the consciousness of both parties. It was rooted in Maki's fear and the creation of the Earth Spider. This was how it should be. However, this excessively powerful external force had turned everything upside down in an instant. All common sense and rules were torn apart without any reason. What replaced it was a huge greed that even nightmares could not bear, endless hunger and hatred. The time for the hunt had begun. The giant spider shadow was shattered in an instant. A scream came from the top of the car. At that moment, Maki opened her eyes and saw the figure standing in front of her. She could not believe it. What happened to me? She was still immersed in the nightmare. She trembled and could not believe what she saw. Huaisher bent down, reached out, and pulled her up from the ground. His other hand was typing on the phone, telling her, "It's just a nightmare. Drink more warm water." Maki was confused. She could not understand, but she could not resist Huaisher's actions. She was pulled up and sent back to her seat. Isn't it not over yet? Behind them, the cooking demon, who had not had a feast for the eyes, suddenly spoke. "There's still work to be done, madam. It's not good to get off work when the ingredients are half processed." As he spoke, he raised his eyes and glanced above his head. Through the roof of the car, they could vaguely hear wails and screams. Someone was running for his life, staggering and running away. Huaisher waved his hand indifferently. He did not care at all. If anything, as soon as he woke up from the nightmare, everything was over. On the top of the car, the monk covered in a long robe was coughing violently. He vomited blood with sticky blood clots. He could not believe it. The nightmare that he had been creating for years was shattered just like that. The hundreds of variations and meticulously designed traps were not used at all, and they were easily burned to ashes from the outside, just like that. A great fear descended upon his consciousness, causing him to grit his teeth, urge his exhausted body, and stagger as he ran. Soon, his escape came to an abrupt stop. He froze on the spot, because under the dim moonlight, a fleeting shadow slowly rose from the top of the car. It was shrouded in a bottomless darkness. He could not even see its face or silhouette. He could only see a pair of cold eyes without any warmth. Young Master Ming's shadow looked down at him coldly. Then she understood. "Earth Spider? Indeed, it's a waste to let such a good material go. Since you've delivered yourself to me, then I won't be polite." In the hands of the ferocious shadow, countless crow feathers appeared, overlapping into a sharp outline, and aimed at his dull face. "I forgot to tell you," Huaisher said softly. "You didn't put salt in your dream." The light of resentment flashed. Immediately, the screams of the stigmata Earth Spider were extinguished in the eternal darkness, devoured by the crows buried in the sanctuary. Only a headless corpse fell to the sky. Together with the head, it rolled down the carriage and fell into the weeds on both sides. And just in front of the train, the light of the city lit up. Nara had arrived. 20 minutes later, outside Nara Station, in a 24-hour express restaurant. The girl sitting opposite Huaisher widened her eyes and asked curiously, "Miss Huaisher, are you hungry?" "I'm not hungry." "Then, Miss Huaisher, are you thirsty?" "I'm not thirsty." "At least eat something. Although I don't have much pocket money, I can still treat my savior to a meal." Zhenshi blinked her big eyes expectantly. "Besides, I still have a lot of things to ask Miss Huaisher." Huaisher sighed, couldn't help but roll his eyes, and raise the phone screen. "You're very annoying." Mom sometimes says that too. Not caring about Huaisher's indifference, Zhenshi didn't hesitate this time. On the contrary, staying by her side was full of an indescribable sense of security. She felt that she was not afraid of anything. "Also, that nightmare, what's going on? Is someone really here to kill me?" "Miss Huaisher, how did you do it? You saved me so easily." Huaishir began to regret her actions. Just where did she get such a curious baby? Isn't that person here to kill you? You should know it yourself, right? The other party should be a resentful monk of Mount Koya. Who did you offend? To be honest, I didn't expect this. I thought no one would care about a character like me. Zhenxi's expression stiffened, and her smile became forced. Although I know about the ascendants, I didn't expect that I would be involved in this kind of thing just by going through the process. Going through the process? Huaishir frowned and raised his hand. Your name? Zhenxi Shinichi Ryumi. The girl puffed out her chest and introduced herself. 17 years old, a high school student. My hobbies are handcraft and painting. I'm a member of the track and field club. My future dream is to become a kindergarten teacher. I'm working hard for the university entrance exam. No, you don't have to tell me this. Huaishir quickly refused. Zhenxi was stunned for a moment, and then she understood. Ah, that's right. After all, Miss Huaishir's figure. It's a pity. She's such a beauty, but she can't speak. Sure enough, there's no perfect existence in the world. Thinking that Miss Huaishir had lived alone in such an environment for so many years, Zhenxi felt like her mother's heart was broken. Huaishir rolled his eyes again and began to have a headache. He felt that this woman had finally gone crazy, but her surname is Ryumi? That means she's a relative of who posed Stinky Sister? She's not even a sender. She looks like a little girl from the countryside. How did she get involved in the struggle for ascenders? And she was even assassinated. What's going on with your family? According to Uncle Yanjing, because the original head of the family, third uncle, has been disqualified by the court officials and has been demoted, the Ryumi family is now without a head. The elders have decided to gather all those who are qualified to inherit the family and choose a new head of the family. Ah, Miss Huaishir, don't look at me like this. My family is also very powerful. Nonsense. Look at how you don't know anything. I probably know more about the Ryumi family than you do. You're also here to participate in this election? Hee hee, it's just going through the process. My father's bloodline is already very thin. Although my name is Ryumi, I grew up in the countryside and have nothing to do with my family. If it weren't for the fact that my father passed away early, this kind of process wouldn't be my turn. Ryumi Maki shyly rubbed her hands together. I thought I could take a few days off and go to Kyoto to play. So, you didn't think about how dangerous the journey would be when you went out. You only thought about going to Kyoto to play after you were done? Huaishir began to admire this person's carelessness. How could you jump into the pit without knowing anything about such a bloody matter? Who posed Stinky Sister even knows how to use money to recruit people and find outside help from Doomsday? Why are you so brave? You're really sending yourself to the door. Huaishir sighed, raised his hand, and asked again. Then, what's going on with the chefs and demons? Do you know about it? Ah, I've heard Uncle Yanjing mention this before. Ryumi Maki's eyes lit up. She excitedly moved closer and tried to put on a serious expression. To talk about this, we have to start from a few hundred years ago. It was like the narration of a day drama. The girl said in a sonorous voice, "It is said that during the Edo period, in order to compete for the position of the general's imperial chef, the chefs used all kinds of methods to fight for it. It was about to set off a bloody storm, but at this time, the general who heard about it finally spoke. She tried her best to imitate the majesty of a general in an old man's voice. Let's fight fair and square." And so, in that instant, violence was given the rule. With her hands on her hips, Shinichi solemnly declared, "This is the trial of the Imperial Kitchen Demon." That you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.